Turkey is known for Roman cities and Byzantine wonders, but beneath these familiar layers lies a far older and deeper mystery. Hidden across Anatolia are colossal ancient structures that challenge everything we believe about early civilization. From Gobekli Tepe, the world's oldest known monumental site, to massive stone complexes, carved and assembled with astonishing precision, these megastructures raise unsettling questions. Who built them long before recorded history? How were such enormous stones shaped, moved and fitted so flawlessly? And why were these sites later buried or abandoned? These silent giants force us to reconsider the true origins of human knowledge and technology. What if an ancient city was planned with a level of precision that feels disturbingly modern? Ephesus is not simply another ruined metropolis of the Mediterranean world. It is a place that quietly challenges everything we assume about the limits of ancient knowledge. Beneath its fallen columns and worn stone streets lies evidence of a city conceived as a complete system, engineered, regulated and organized with a clarity that seems far ahead of its time. Streets aligned with purpose, infrastructure hidden beneath the surface, and urban zones arranged according to logic rather than chance all point to something unsettling. Ephesus was not built the way we expect ancient cities to be built. Its urban planning suggests not improvisation, but foresight. Not gradual trial and error, but deliberate design. And this raises a troubling question that historians still struggle to answer. How did a civilization we consider ancient think so precisely, so systematically, and so modernly about the city as a living machine? Do you think Ephesus proves that ancient civilizations were far more modern than we assume? Or could it be evidence of a body of knowledge that history has never fully recorded? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Ephesus did not develop randomly or organically as many ancient cities did. Instead, it was constructed as a carefully calculated whole in which every street, every functional zone, and every public structure fit into a deliberate and tightly organized spatial framework. This indicates that the city was shaped by long-term vision and planning rather than uncontrolled expansion across generations. The street and sewer system of Ephesus stands as one of the clearest pieces of evidence that the city's technical thinking and urban planning far exceeded the conventional patterns of the ancient world. The main roads were not only solidly paved with stone, but were also engineered with precise gradients, allowing rainwater and waste to flow naturally into underground sewer channels beneath the city. Hidden below the surface was an extensive and complex drainage network constructed as a unified system from the very beginning, with a clear separation between clean water and waste, a principle of urban hygiene that many medieval European cities would neither understand nor achieve for centuries. Crucially, these roads did not exist in isolation. They functioned as the structural skeleton of the entire city, linking plazas, administrative districts, commercial centers, public bath complexes, theaters, and residential areas according to a unified logic. This reveals that Ephesus was not built merely to facilitate movement, but was designed as a fully integrated operating system in which technical infrastructure shaped how people lived, moved, and organized their society. One of the most astonishing aspects of Ephesus lies in how the city approached hygiene and public health. Its public latrine system was not built in a crude or temporary manner, but was tightly integrated into the citywide water supply and sewer network. Fixed stone seating was installed above channels of continuously flowing water, allowing waste to be carried away and the space to remain clean. This was not merely a technical solution, but a reflection of advanced urban thinking, demonstrating that the people of Ephesus clearly understood the relationship between living environments, sanitation, and human health. It shows that the city did not focus solely on monumental architecture, but paid close attention to the quality of everyday life for its residents. Residential areas were not mixed indiscriminately with industrial or commercial zones. Instead, they were clearly divided according to social status and functional purpose, indicating a society with a strong awareness of organization, order, and urban control. This spatial arrangement reflects a governing structure powerful enough to enforce discipline and guide urban development over long periods of time. The way Ephesus arranged its public buildings reveals a surprisingly advanced sense of spatial thinking, one that aligns more closely with modern urban planning than with conventional images of the ancient world. The Library of Celsus, the Agora, the Great Theatre, public bath complexes and temples were not scattered randomly or constructed as isolated displays of grandeur. Instead, they were positioned according to a clear and deliberate logic designed to optimize human movement, accessibility, natural light, and ventilation. The placement of each structure indicates that the city's planners understood how people interact with urban space, transforming Ephesus into a carefully organized living environment rather than a mere collection of monumental buildings. What troubles many researchers is whether this entire planning system evolved gradually through centuries of experimentation, or whether it was based on a pre-existing, standardized body of knowledge, possibly inherited from even older urban traditions whose traces have largely vanished from the historical record. The long-term preservation of design coherence suggests that Ephesus possessed not only technical expertise, but also a strong urban administrative system, capable of enforcing and protecting its planning principles against population pressure and social change. Even as the city expanded and reached its peak of prosperity, its core structure remained intact, unbroken by a chaotic or unregulated growth, a phenomenon exceedingly rare in ancient urban history. When Ephesus is placed alongside other cities of the same period, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Most ancient cities developed in a fragmented and improvised manner with limited infrastructure and little long-term planning. By contrast, Ephesus possessed a fully developed sewer system, streets engineered with precisely calculated gradients and clearly defined functional zones. It is this level of systematic superiority that makes Ephesus appear not as a random product of its era, but as a difficult-to-explain exception in the history of ancient urbanism. For this reason, Ephesus presents history with an uncomfortable question. Have we underestimated the capacity for systemic thinking in ancient civilizations, or is Ephesus the surviving trace of a once-existing peak of knowledge that was never fully transmitted? The city's decline only deepens this question, as a place planned with such intelligence ultimately failed to save itself from harbor silting and environmental transformation. Did the builders of Ephesus possess a profound understanding of urban spatial organization, yet remain powerless against long-term natural change? Or did the collapse of administrative systems cause this sophisticated planning knowledge to be lost? Ephesus, therefore, is not merely a collection of stone ruins and fallen columns, but a living testament that the past may have been far more complex, organized, and modern than we usually imagine. And that is precisely why it remains one of the greatest urban mysteries of the ancient world. Long before cities, long before agriculture, and long before humanity was supposed to be capable of organized thought, something extraordinary rose from stone. On a quiet, artificial hill in southeastern Anatolia lies Gobekli Tepe, a site so ancient, so precisely constructed that its very existence challenges everything we thought we knew about the origins of civilization. Dating back approximately 11,500 to 12,000 years, this monument was built at a time when humans were believed to be little more than nomadic hunter-gatherers, lacking metal tools, wheeled transport, written language, or permanent settlements. And yet standing here is a vast stone complex of astonishing scale and precision, deliberately planned and meticulously executed. Gobekli Tepe does not merely add a chapter to human history, it forces us to question whether the story itself has been written in the wrong order. How could a society without metal wheels or agriculture design and construct a stone monument with such extraordinary precision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The core of Gobekli Tepe is formed by circular and oval stone enclosures, where massive stone pillars are arranged in a highly ordered layout, with the two largest pillars consistently positioned at the center, acting as the spiritual axis of the entire structure. These pillars feature a distinctive T-shaped form carved directly from single blocks of limestone, standing between 4 and 6 meters tall and weighing from 10 to more than 20 tons. What truly astonishes archaeologists is not merely their monumental size, but the near-perfect uniformity in proportions, shape, and craftsmanship across the pillars. The stone surfaces were carefully smoothed, the edges sharply defined, revealing a remarkable level of control over material and form. Such precision rules out random construction or purely instinctive craftsmanship, instead pointing to an architectural standard that had been conceived in advance and rigorously followed. Gobekli Tepe, therefore, is not a crude assembly of standing stones, but the result of geometric thinking, deliberate spatial planning, and refined technical skill, far exceeding what hunter-gatherer societies were long believed to be capable of achieving. The extraction, transportation, and erection of the massive stone blocks at Gobekli Tepe remains one of the most difficult questions in modern archaeology. At the time this site was constructed, humans had no draft. Animals had not yet invented the wheel and possessed no metal tools of any kind. Yet they were still capable of cutting limestone with remarkable precision, separating monolithic blocks weighing tens of tons from the quarry and transporting them across distances of hundreds of meters, in some cases nearly a kilometer. More importantly, these pillars were not merely moved, but carefully raised into an upright position and placed with precision within a well-ordered geometric layout. Such a process required coordinated teamwork, an understanding of force timing and method, as well as a social organization structured enough to sustain large-scale collective labor over extended periods. These demands indicate that the technical and organizational capabilities of the people who built Gobekli Tepe far exceeded traditional assumptions about early hunter-gatherer societies. The spatial layout of Gobekli Tepe reveals that it is not a collection of structures built in a fragmented or random manner, but the result of a deliberate and carefully calculated planning system. The stone circles do not overlap chaotically. Instead, they are arranged along clearly defined axes, maintaining consistent relationships in both position and orientation. This controlled repetition within the architectural layout suggests that the builders were capable of visualizing the entire complex from the outset rather than expanding it in an improvised or incremental way over time. Some hypotheses propose that this spatial organization may have been based on early geometric principles or even linked to observations of the sky and natural cycles. Although no definitive conclusion has yet been reached, Gobekli Tepe unmistakably reflects a level of spatial awareness and organizational thinking far beyond what Stone Age societies were long assumed to possess. Notably, the two central pillars within each enclosure are consistently larger and more elaborately carved than the surrounding stones. Their surfaces bear relief carvings depicting arms, hands belts, and loincloths, leading many scholars to believe that these pillars were not merely structural supports, but symbolic representations, possibly of sacred beings, ancestors, or mythological figures. This strongly suggests that architecture at Gobekli Tepe served not only a functional purpose, but also carried profound symbolic meaning, where form and belief were inseparably intertwined. The precision of Gobekli Tepe's architecture is most clearly demonstrated by the remarkable stability of its stone pillars after tens of millennia. Despite continuous exposure to time, weather, and environmental change, many of these pillars remain upright, showing little evidence of collapse or significant displacement. This suggests that the builders were not placing stone intuitively or at random, but possessed a practical understanding of gravity balance and stable foundations. Although no formalized concepts of physics existed at the time, they appear to have mastered fundamental principles through careful observation and long-accumulated experience. More importantly, the consistent application of these principles throughout the entire site indicates that this was not isolated individual knowledge, but a shared system of understanding, collectively maintained and strictly followed during construction. When viewed within the broader historical context, Gobekli Tepe presents a profound paradox. According to traditional models, complex architecture emerges only after agricultural stability has been achieved. Yet here, monumental construction appears to predate agriculture itself. This has led to a radical reversal hypothesis that the need to build and maintain ritual centers like Gobekli Tepe may have encouraged long-term settlement, which in turn gave rise to agriculture. If this interpretation is correct, architecture is no longer a product of civilization, but one of its primary catalysts. The mystery of Gobekli Tepe does not end with how it was built, but extends to how it was brought to an end. The entire architectural complex was deliberately buried, not as the result of natural collapse or gradual abandonment over time. The layers of soil stone and debris that filled the structures indicate an organized action carried out while the site was still under the control of its builders. This strongly suggests that Gobekli Tepe was intentionally closed through a specific act or ritual, possibly carrying spiritual meaning or marking the conclusion of a belief system or ceremonial cycle. Rather than allowing the monument to decay, the people of that era appear to have deliberately sealed it, as if seeking to preserve or conceal a sacred space from the world that followed. This act of burial transforms Gobekli Tepe from a monumental architectural achievement into a silent message left behind by a distant past, one whose true motivations remain beyond our complete understanding. Today, with much of Gobekli Tepe still lying beneath the ground, its architecture continues to challenge the boundaries of modern understanding. Each newly uncovered pillar and enclosure does more than provide data, it raises new questions about creativity, organization, and abstract thought in early human societies. Through its extraordinarily complex and precise architecture, Gobekli Tepe demonstrates that from the very dawn of history, humans possessed capabilities far beyond what we once imagined, and that civilization may have begun not in cultivated fields, but among colossal stones erected in the name of belief ritual and a desire to connect with forces beyond ordinary comprehension. Long before cities had streets, before kings ruled from palaces, and before power was carved into stone monuments, there existed a place that followed none of those rules. Catalhoyuk stands as one of the most unsettling challenges to modern interpretations of early human society, not because it is ancient, but because it feels fundamentally out of place in the story we believe about civilization. Founded around the 9th millennium BCE, this densely packed settlement housed thousands of people in a seamless mass of interlocked homes, with no roads, no central squares, and no visible symbols of authority. Nothing here resembles the expected path toward hierarchy, control, or domination. Instead, Catalhoyuk presents a question that archaeology still struggles to answer. How could a large, long-lasting community function and thrive without the structures we assume civilization requires? If a society could thrive without power hierarchy or rulers, would you call it more advanced or simply misunderstood? Share your thoughts in the comments below. At Catalhoyuk, the very concept of living space runs counter to nearly every urban norm familiar to modern humans. There were no streets, alleyways, or public squares. Instead, the entire settlement formed a continuous mass of interconnected houses with rooftops functioning as shared pathways. Residents moved across flat roofs and descended into their homes through openings in the ceiling, turning the roof itself into the sole boundary between the community and the outside world. Even more striking is the near-total uniformity of the architecture. There were no larger houses for the powerful, no districts reserved for elites, and no temples or monumental structures dominating the landscape. This spatial organization suggests that space at Catalhoyuk was not used to display status or authority, but instead reflected a social mindset in which individuals existed within an almost fundamentally equal living structure. At Catalhoyuk, social equality was accompanied by a deeply unsettling relationship between the living and the dead. Rather than separating burial spaces from daily life, the inhabitants buried their dead directly beneath the floors of their homes, below the places where they ate, slept, and carried out everyday activities. Across generations, families lived literally above the remains of their ancestors, as if death were not an end, but a continuation of communal existence. Most strikingly, some skulls were removed from their graves, deliberately modified, painted, or displayed separately, suggesting that the dead may have held an important spiritual role, one that allowed them to remain a constant presence within the living space of the community. Art at Catalhoyuk was not merely decorative, but appears to reflect a complex symbolic system that has yet to be fully deciphered. On the interior walls of houses, archaeologists repeatedly encounter images of dangerous animals, enigmatic abstract motifs, and female figures with clearly emphasized reproductive features. What is particularly striking is that these images were deliberately repeated, yet were never accompanied by any form of writing or explanatory symbols. This silence has forced researchers to ask difficult questions. Do these images represent religious beliefs, cyclical ritual practices, or a way for this community to record its understanding of the world and humanity's place within it? To this day, no single interpretation has been able to fully account for the true meaning of this symbolic system. Despite being a densely populated settlement that endured for centuries, Catalhoyuk shows no clear evidence of warfare. There are no defensive walls, no fortifications, and no unmistakable military weapons, leading researchers to question whether this was a relatively peaceful society or whether conflict existed in forms that archaeology has not yet been able to detect. The long-term existence of Catalhoyuk is remarkable in itself, but what truly perplexes archaeologists is the manner in which this community reached its end. For thousands of years, Catalhoyuk maintained a stable social structure, showing none of the familiar signs of social evolution, such as hierarchical power divisions, the formation of a state, or dominant monumental architecture. Yet it was precisely such a stable community that was gradually abandoned without leaving behind any clear evidence of crisis or catastrophe. Archaeological strata reveal no traces of major earthquakes, devastating epidemics, armed conflict, or large-scale violent destruction. There are no ruined fortifications, no concentrations of weapons, and no evidence of mass death. Instead, all available data point toward a slow, orderly withdrawal, as if the inhabitants of Catalhoyuk deliberately chose to leave what had once been the center of their lives. It is precisely this sense of calm in the process of disappearance that raises the central question: why would a densely populated community, well adapted to its environment and resilient across many generations, decide to abandon its familiar living space? Some hypotheses suggest that long-term climate change altered the surrounding ecosystem, reducing water availability, arable land, and natural resources below sustainable levels. Other approaches emphasize population pressure, declining soil fertility, or shifts in regional exchange networks that gradually caused Catalhoyuk to lose its role as an economic and social hub. However, all of these explanations face significant limitations, as there is no compelling evidence that the community entered a severe crisis or was forced to leave in desperation. An increasing number of researchers argue that the disappearance of Catalhoyuk should not be interpreted as a collapse, but rather as the result of a profound transformation in social and spiritual thought. When belief systems, rituals, and the ways people defined the relationship between community living space and the surrounding world changed. The physical structures that once held central meaning may have become unnecessary. From this perspective, Catalhoyuk did not die. It was simply left behind as the trace of a way of life that had fulfilled its historical role. It is this ambiguity that has turned Catalhoyuk into one of the greatest mysteries of prehistory, a society that did not pursue power, did not develop into a state, did not collapse through violence, and left no clear explanation for its own departure. It forces us to accept that human history does not always follow a single predictable linear path, and that there were once communities that chose to disappear quietly, leaving behind not answers, but questions that endure to this day. High above the plains of southeastern Turkey, nearly 2,000 meters closer to the sky than the world below, rises Nemrut Dagi, a place that feels deliberately removed from human reach. Here, on a wind-scoured summit, where survival itself is a challenge, ancient builders raised something that still defies simple explanation: a colossal artificial mountain of stone encircled by gigantic statues of gods, legendary figures, and a king who claimed a place among them. This was not a city, not a fortress, and not a monument meant for crowds. What confronts modern researchers is not only the audacity of constructing such a complex in one of the most hostile locations imaginable, but the unsettling realization that every stone, every figure, and every alignment appears to follow a deeper symbolic logic, one rooted not on Earth, but in the cosmos above. Why would an ancient civilization build a monument like this so close to the sky, and who was it truly meant for? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The colossal stone heads at Nemrut Dagi, now scattered across the ground before their seated bodies, form one of the most haunting images within the entire complex. They do not merely suggest decay or ruin, but rather evoke the impression of a moment deliberately frozen in history. The fact that all the heads were severed in a remarkably similar manner makes the hypothesis of random collapse caused by earthquakes increasingly unconvincing. Some scholars argue that this may have been a ritualized act intended to symbolically terminate the divine authority of the gods and the king, while others suspect a deliberate destruction carried out during a period of political upheaval. More striking still is that these faces do not represent a single religious tradition, but instead embody a calculated fusion of Greek mythology, Persian belief systems, and indigenous Anatolian traditions. This synthesis suggests that Nemrut Dagi was not merely a place of worship, but a powerful ideological statement, one in which political authority was cloaked in divine form and positioned alongside the very order of the cosmos itself. The most profound source of suspicion at Nemrut Dagi lies in the precise orientation of the entire complex in relation to the movement of the sun. The two main ceremonial terraces, positioned to the east and west, were not placed at random, but appear to have been carefully calculated to interact directly with the moments of sunrise and sunset. At certain times of the year, the morning light strikes the eastern row of statues head-on, illuminating the faces of the gods and the king, while the fading light of dusk envelops the western statues in shadow, creating a deliberate cycle of light and darkness imbued with ritual meaning. This arrangement suggests that Nemrut Dagi was not merely a monument meant to be observed, but a space designed to be activated by the sky itself. What makes this even more striking is that achieving such precision at an elevation of nearly 2,000 meters, amid rugged terrain, and with the limited technology of the ancient world, would have required astronomical knowledge and long-term observational skills far beyond what is typically assumed. This greatly weakens the argument for coincidence and opens the possibility that Nemrut Dagi was conceived as a ritual instrument intrinsically bound to time, cosmic cycles, and the order of the celestial bodies. Many researchers argue that Nemrut Dagi cannot be fully understood if it is separated from the astrological and cosmological worldview of the ancient world. Surviving inscriptions indicate that Antiochus I did not regard himself as merely a mortal king, but as a direct descendant of the gods, destined to serve as an intermediary between heaven and earth. From this perspective, Nemrut Dagi can be envisioned as an eternal stage where the king's existence was synchronized with the movement of the sun, the passage of time, and the cycles of the cosmos. The deliberate placement of his own statue alongside those of the gods reveals an ambition to transcend human limitations, transforming political authority into an integral part of the celestial order. As a result, the boundary between tomb temple and astronomical observatory at Nemrut Dagi becomes blurred, suggesting that the monument was not built merely to commemorate death, but to inscribe the king's everlasting presence into the very structure of the universe. Although Nemrut Dagi is commonly regarded as the tomb of King Antiochus, one the most troubling issue for archaeologists is that no burial chamber or human remains have ever been discovered. This absence is not merely an archaeological gap. It raises the deeper possibility that death itself was never the central focus of the monument. Instead, Nemrut Dagi appears to have been conceived to serve a form of symbolic immortality in which the king did not need to be physically buried, but was instead inscribed into the order of the cosmos. Within this interpretation, the precise astronomical layout ceases to be a secondary feature and emerges as the ideological core of the entire complex, a declaration that royal authority was bound to the cycles of the sky, and that the king's existence was synchronized with the eternal movement of the celestial bodies. The construction of such a monumental complex in an isolated location, far removed from major population centers, reinforces the sense that Nemrut Dagi was not built for ordinary people, but for the gods, the heavens, and those seeking to transmit a message beyond the limits of time. It is this profound convergence of architecture, religion, political power, and astronomy that transforms Nemrut Dagi into an enduring enigma, one where every stone, every alignment, and every ray of dawn light may carry meanings far deeper than what the human eye alone can perceive. Hattusa, the ancient capital of the Hittite Empire, was once one of the greatest centers of power in the Near Eastern world. During the Bronze Age, a city where politics, religion, and military authority were tightly interwoven, forming a civilization that was both formidable and complex. Yet what makes Hattusa most haunting in human history lies not only in its scale, its vast clay tablet archives, or its massive fortification walls, but in the way it collapsed suddenly, silently, and under deeply suspicious circumstances, as if history itself had deliberately erased it. For centuries, Hattusa was the heart of the Hittite Empire, the place where international treaties were signed, laws were issued, religious rituals were performed to maintain cosmic order according to their beliefs, and royal authority was reinforced not only by armies, but also by the backing of hundreds of gods. This city was not a fragile settlement, but a carefully planned urban center, built on rugged terrain with multiple layers of defense food storage facilities, temples, palaces, and a complex administrative system, clear evidence that it was designed to endure war and crisis over the long term. In your opinion, what truly caused a powerful capital like Hattusa to collapse and disappear almost without a trace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. It is precisely for this reason that the abandonment of Hattusa around the late 12th century BCE has become one of the greatest questions in archaeology and ancient history. Unlike many other cities that were destroyed in fire and blood, Hattusa does not present clear evidence of total annihilation. Layers of ash exist, but they are inconsistent and lack the unmistakable marks of a violent sack. Many areas appear to have been cleared before being deserted. Some archives remain, while the most valuable items seem to have been deliberately removed. This suggests that the Hittites were not wiped out overnight, but rather left their capital through an organized process, or at least with preparation, an extremely unusual scenario for the capital of an empire that had stood at the height of its power only decades earlier. Many hypotheses have been proposed to explain the collapse of Hattusa, yet to this day, none is sufficient to encompass the full picture. Among them, the theory of the Sea Peoples was once considered the most convincing explanation, as these groups are often blamed for the widespread breakdown of civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean at the end of the Bronze Age. However, when examined against the archaeological evidence from Hattusa, this theory reveals significant weaknesses. The city was located deep within inland Anatolia, far from coastal migration routes, making it highly unlikely to have been a direct target of large-scale invading groups. More importantly, Hattusa shows no clear signs of a prolonged assault, such as uniformly destroyed fortification walls or systematically dismantled defensive structures. This suggests that if external forces did play a role, they were likely only one element within a much broader chain of crises rather than the sole cause behind the fall of the Hittite capital. One of the hypotheses, most widely supported by scholars, suggests that the collapse of Hattusa originated from a prolonged climatic crisis, leading to severe droughts and widespread crop failures. Late Hittite records clearly document food shortages, including appeals by the royal court for grain from neighboring regions, indicating that the supply system had fallen into serious disruption. For an empire heavily dependent on agriculture and a centralized distribution network, famine did not merely cause physical exhaustion, but also undermined confidence in the king and the protective gods who were believed to uphold cosmic order. However, what complicates this hypothesis is the fact that the Hittites had previously endured wars and periods of scarcity. As a result, famine alone may not have been the sole cause of collapse, but rather a catalyst that exposed long-standing weaknesses embedded within the empire's economic and political structure. Another important explanation for the collapse of Hattusa lies in the internal fractures of the Hittite Empire itself. This was a multi-ethnic, multilingual state, sustained not only by military power, but also by a complex network of alliances, vassal relationships, and religious beliefs. The central authority of the Hittite king depended on a delicate balance between noble factions, distant territories, and the priestly class. When succession disputes emerged, vassal loyalty weakened, and the administrative system became overstretched, this fragile stability began to fracture. Even a small chain of disruptive events could trigger a domino effect, causing the entire state apparatus to disintegrate from within. Yet what remains deeply puzzling is that even in a period of decline, Hattusa, the ultimate symbol of Hittite power, was completely abandoned rather than continuing to function as the center of a successor dynasty. Perhaps most striking is the way the Hittites seem to vanish from written history, leaving Hattusa as a dead city, while other contemporary civilizations, though diminished, continued to exist in one form or another. After Hattusa was abandoned, no major city was rebuilt on its foundations, as if the site had lost its sacred or political significance for those who came after. For centuries, Hattusa lay in silence, unmentioned in Greek or Roman records, and the name of the Hittites faded into obscurity, so much so that when modern scholars first encountered the name in the Bible, they had no idea it referred to a former superpower. The fall of Hattusa, therefore, was not merely the collapse of a city, but a rupture in historical memory, a rare case in which an entire empire was nearly erased from humanity's collective awareness. Hattusa may have fallen due to multiple simultaneous causes: harsh climate conditions, economic crisis, political instability, external pressures, and the breakdown of the religious belief system that had once bound Hittite society together. Yet it is precisely this silent and combined convergence of factors, along with the city's abandonment, rather than violent destruction, that makes Hattusa one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. It poses a chilling and profound question: can a civilization collapse not because of a single catastrophe, but because of the slow erosion of the very system that once made it great until at the final moment, no one remains with the strength or the faith to stay and carry on. In its millennia-long silence, Hattusa seems to guard that answer for itself, continuing to challenge scholars, historians, and our entire understanding of how civilizations rise and disappear. Rising from the heart of southeastern Anatolia, the Diyarbakir walls do not merely surround a city, they confront history itself. Built from vast blocks of black basalt, a volcanic stone so hard it challenges even modern tools, these walls have stood for nearly 2 millennia in a land shaped by war, earthquakes, and the rise and fall of empires. Stretching for almost 5 kilometers, towering over 10 meters high and several meters thick, the walls appear less like a human construction and more like a geological phenomenon, deliberately shaped into a fortress. Yet nothing about their existence should be simple. Why would ancient builders choose one of the most difficult materials known to stonework? How did they quarry, transport, and assemble such immense blocks with such precision? And how has this dark monolithic barrier endured forces that erased countless other cities from history? The Diyarbakir walls are not just ancient defenses, they are a question carved in black stone, still unanswered. What do you think truly allowed the Diyarbakir walls to endure for thousands of years? Advanced construction techniques, the mysterious black basalt stone, or an ancient knowledge we have since lost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The construction of the Diyarbakir walls was not merely a defensive effort, but a clear demonstration of an astonishing level of organization and engineering in the ancient world. Massive blocks of black basalt, weighing several tons each, were quarried, transported, and elevated with remarkable precision, despite the absence of evidence for complex wheeled systems, metal pulleys, or modern lifting machinery. The stones were shaped with relative uniformity and fitted so tightly that little to no mortar was required, indicating a sophisticated understanding of weight distribution and structural locking through sheer mass alone. This achievement demanded not only immense physical labor, but also deep empirical knowledge of materials, terrain, and structural mechanics, knowledge that modern archaeology has yet to fully reconstruct or explain. Basalt was among the most unforgiving materials available to ancient builders. Unlike limestone or sandstone, it is extremely hard, quickly dulls tools, resists precise carving, and requires enormous physical effort to shape and transport. Choosing basalt meant slower construction, higher labor costs, and greater technical risk. This makes its deliberate use at Diyarbakir deeply puzzling. The decision suggests that durability, permanence, or symbolic power outweighed convenience, pointing to priorities that went far beyond simple practicality or short-term defense. The use of black basalt at the Diyarbakir walls may have carried a meaning far beyond structural necessity. Its extreme durability suggests an intentional statement of permanence, a message carved into stone that this city was meant to endure longer than dynasties, longer than wars, perhaps even longer than memory itself. The dark, almost light-absorbing color of basalt transforms the walls into a looming presence, stripping them of ornamentation and replacing beauty with intimidation. Approaching the city, one would not see warmth or invitation, but mass weight and inevitability. In this sense, the walls functioned not only as physical defenses, but as psychological weapons, projecting authority, dominance, and the unsettling impression that resistance was futile long before any battle began. The most perplexing characteristic of the Diyarbakir walls lies in their extraordinary resistance to earthquakes. Situated within a highly active seismic zone, the region has experienced countless tremors and destructive events over centuries, yet the walls have rarely suffered catastrophic collapse. This resilience appears almost contradictory to their sheer mass. Built from enormous blocks of black basalt, one would expect rigidity to become a weakness under seismic stress. Instead, the structure endures. Some researchers propose that the irregular stone bonding the immense weight of individual blocks and the segmented, slightly curved geometry of the walls may work together to dissipate seismic energy rather than concentrate it. Micro-movements between stones could allow the structure to breathe during earthquakes, absorbing shock instead of fracturing. Whether this outcome was the result of deliberate engineering knowledge or an accidental byproduct of empirical building practices remains unknown. To this day, no comprehensive modern engineering model has fully explained how such a massive stone fortification continues to withstand forces that have destroyed far lighter constructions. The layered construction history of the Diyarbakir walls adds another unresolved dimension to the mystery. Over centuries, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, and Ottoman rulers repaired, expanded, and reshaped the fortifications, each leaving visible marks of their era. Yet beneath these later additions lies an older basalt core that appears largely untouched. Its construction techniques, scale, and material coherence differ subtly from later phases, suggesting it may belong to a much earlier period. This buried foundation stands as a silent witness to an origin that remains archaeologically unclear, raising the possibility that the earliest builders of the walls possessed knowledge or intentions now lost to history. The inscriptions and symbols carved into the basalt towers of the Diyarbakir walls introduce a layer of mystery that goes beyond military function. Texts appear in multiple languages: Latin, Greek, Syriac, Arabic, reflecting successive powers. Yet their placement often seems deliberate, rather than merely decorative. Alongside written inscriptions are animal reliefs and abstract symbols whose meanings remain unclear, especially when viewed outside their original cultural context. More intriguing still are sections where inscriptions appear partially erased, damaged in a non-random manner, or deliberately built over by later stonework. This pattern suggests not simple weathering, but intentional alteration. Such acts raise the possibility that certain messages, beliefs, or claims associated with the earliest phases of the walls were deliberately obscured, either to suppress former identities or to assert new authority over the same stones. Taken together, these elements transform the Diyarbakir walls from a conventional fortification into a monumental question, carved in black basalt. Who truly initiated its construction? With what technology, for what deeper purpose, and why were they willing to expend such vast resources to create a structure so heavy, enduring, and ominous? Even today, as these black basalt stones stand firm, cold, and silent. Within the modern city, the Diyarbakir walls continue to challenge archaeologists and historians alike, reminding us that some ancient knowledge remains only partially understood. Long before cities' kings or written language existed, there was Cayonu, not a temporary camp, not a primitive experiment, but a community so organized, so deliberate in its design, that it challenges everything we think we know about early human society. For centuries, its people built, farmed, planned, and lived with a level of structure that seems almost out of place for such a distant age. And then, without warning, without destruction, without clear reason, they left. No war scars, no ashes of catastrophe, just silence, rising in southeastern Anatolia, nearly 10,000 years before the Common Era. Cayonu marks one of humanity's first steps into permanent settlement and one of its earliest, most unsettling disappearances. It is not simply an ancient site. It is a question that refuses to fade. Why would a society so advanced choose to leave everything behind? What do you think truly forced the people of Cayonu to abandon their world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Cayonu does not represent a random or chaotic stage of early human settlement. Instead, its archaeological layers reveal a remarkably ordered and intentional process of development, unfolding over generations. Architectural designs progressed through clearly defined technical phases, beginning with simple earthen floor dwellings and advancing toward carefully planned stone structures built with increasing precision. This evolution reflects accumulated knowledge rather than trial and error. At the same time, tools became more specialized, while evidence of early plant cultivation and animal domestication appears almost simultaneously. Even more striking are traces of natural copper use, suggesting technological awareness, well before the formal emergence of metallurgy. Cayonu challenges the long-held assumption that early Stone Age communities were loosely organized or intellectually simplistic. Archaeological evidence instead points to a society structured around shared rules, collective spaces, and deeply embedded symbolic practices. The layout of the settlement suggests intentional planning rather than organic sprawl, indicating social coordination beyond basic survival needs. Most striking is the so-called skull building, where human skulls were carefully separated, modified, and arranged. This was not random behavior, but a deliberate act, implying ritual authority, social memory, and early concepts of power. Such practices reveal that abstract thought belief systems and social hierarchy had already taken root far earlier than traditionally believed. For this reason, what makes Cayonu truly mysterious is not its emergence, but its disappearance. After centuries of stable development, the settlement was completely abandoned without any clear evidence of catastrophe. There are no signs of large-scale warfare, no thick layers of ash indicating destructive fires, and no traces of sudden collapse as seen in many other ancient cities. The abandonment of Cayonu remains one of the most contested questions in prehistoric research, precisely because the archaeological record is so quiet. There is no clear layer of destruction, no mass graves, and no sudden break in material culture that would signal violence or catastrophe. One prominent hypothesis points to gradual climate change, suggesting shifts in rainfall patterns, water availability, and vegetation may have slowly undermined agricultural stability. Yet paleoclimatic data from the region does not indicate a dramatic environmental collapse at the exact moment the site was deserted. This absence of definitive evidence forces researchers to consider that Cayonu may not have been abandoned due to crisis, but through a slower, more deliberate process that archaeology struggles to capture. The resource depletion hypothesis argues that Cayonu may have been undermined by the very success that once sustained it. As the population grew and agriculture expanded, increasing pressure was placed on surrounding soils, forests, and grazing lands. Intensive farming could have exhausted nutrients in the soil, while widespread wood use for construction and fuel may have accelerated deforestation. Over time, these cumulative stresses may have reduced the land's ability to support a stable community. However, this explanation remains incomplete, as it does not fully clarify why the inhabitants chose total abandonment rather than adaptation relocation within the region or social restructuring to manage declining resources. A more nuanced interpretation suggests that the abandonment of Cayonu may have been driven not by environmental collapse or economic failure, but by profound shifts within social organization and belief systems. Archaeological evidence indicates that ritual practices and symbolic spaces were central to communal life, serving as anchors of identity and social cohesion. If these core beliefs evolved or fractured over time, the very rituals that once unified the community may have lost their authority or even become sources of tension. In such a context, remaining within an established sacred landscape could have felt constraining rather than stabilizing. It is also plausible that Cayonu fulfilled a specific historical function, a transitional social laboratory where early humans experimented with permanent settlement agriculture and collective governance. Once these models were internalized, the site itself may no longer have been necessary. From this perspective, abandonment does not signal collapse or failure, but a deliberate and conscious decision to move forward, leaving behind a place that had completed its purpose as the community carried its knowledge, traditions, and social frameworks into new territories and new chapters of human development. The mystery of Cayonu is therefore not simply the story of an abandoned site, but a challenge to how we understand the evolution of human civilization. It undermines the idea that ancient societies always progressed in a straight line, from simple to complex, from chaos to order. Cayonu demonstrates that humans were capable of remarkably sophisticated organization at a very early stage, and yet were also willing to leave everything behind without the dramatic markers of disaster or collapse. It is precisely this silence that makes Cayonu one of the deepest enigmas of prehistory, a place where the most important question is not how did they build, but why did they leave? Derinkuyu is not just a forgotten structure buried beneath the soil of Cappadocia, it is a silent warning, carved into the earth itself. Hidden more than 60 meters underground and descending through at least 18 carefully engineered levels, this place was never meant to be a temporary refuge or a desperate hiding spot. Derinkuyu was a fully realized underground city designed to support tens of thousands of people in isolation from the surface world for long periods of time. Every ventilation shaft, every water well, every storage chamber and sealed stone door points to deliberate planning, long-term survival, and a disturbing realization: those who built this city did not believe the world above was safe. And that leads to the most unsettling question of all, not how Derinkuyu was built, but why human beings felt compelled to disappear beneath the earth in the first place. What do you think could have driven entire generations to abandon the surface world and live underground? Share your thoughts in the comments below. To this day, history has left no written records that clearly describe the original origins of Derinkuyu. What researchers possess instead are architectural traces and indirect inferences. One widely accepted hypothesis suggests that the earliest deep levels may have been initiated by the Phrygians in the first millennium BCE, and later expanded and modified by successive civilizations such as the Persians, Romans, and Byzantines. However, this explanation only clarifies who used Derinkuyu across different periods. It does not answer the most critical question of all: what compelled people from the very beginning to conceive of digging tens of meters underground on a scale far exceeding ordinary shelter needs. The enormous investment of labor time and resources into a completely buried living space indicates that the original motivation could not have been accidental or temporary, but rather rooted in a profound concern for the safety of the surface world. The construction of Derinkuyu could not have been the result of a short-term effort or the work of a small, isolated community. This undertaking required a vast labor force, highly organized social coordination, precise technical knowledge, and a time frame extending across multiple generations. From excavating deep into hard volcanic rock and maintaining structural stability to designing ventilation systems and reliable water access, every detail reflects a level of preparation far beyond ordinary shelter needs. Only when confronted with a threat, both immense and long-lasting, would humans have been willing to commit such enormous resources to creating a fully underground living space. Many hypotheses suggest that Derinkuyu was built in response to warfare, invasion, or recurring episodes of religious persecution throughout the ancient history of Anatolia. However, a closer examination of the underground city's structure suggests that this explanation may be insufficient. Even during periods of intense warfare, typical shelter needs would not require digging tens of meters into the earth, constructing numerous stacked levels, and creating a system capable of being completely sealed off for extended periods of time. The massive circular stone doors weighing several tons, which could only be closed from the inside, the narrow and sloping corridors designed to slow any intruder, and the ability to cut off all contact with the outside world indicate that Derinkuyu was not built to withstand a short-term attack. Instead, it reflects a fear that was prolonged, recurring, and possibly permanent. Another line of explanation for the emergence of Derinkuyu is linked to large-scale natural disasters that may once have made life on the surface increasingly dangerous. Some researchers suggest that extreme climate shifts, prolonged cold periods, severe droughts, or regional volcanic activity could have forced human communities to seek long-term refuge underground. However, these hypotheses have yet to be supported by sufficiently convincing geological evidence to fully explain why Derinkuyu was used continuously over many centuries. As a result, an alternative perspective has emerged. Derinkuyu may reflect a collective memory of much deeper periods of turmoil in human history, when the Earth's surface was no longer considered a safe environment for survival. In this context, descending underground was not merely a response to a single catastrophe, but a final survival strategy in the face of a world that humanity no longer trusted. From the gaps in conventional historical records, a more daring hypothesis has emerged. Derinkuyu may not be the product of familiar classical civilizations, but instead originate from a very early prehistoric period, later inherited and gradually expanded by successive societies over time. In this scenario, later communities may have reused existing structures without fully understanding their original purpose. What makes this hypothesis particularly compelling is the presence of long tunnels connecting Derinkuyu to multiple other underground cities throughout the Cappadocia region. This network suggests a region-wide subterranean living system that was planned in advance rather than a series of isolated short-term responses to immediate threats. If the question of who built Derinkuyu remains unanswered, the question of why is even more unsettling. Unlike pyramids or surface temples meant to display power or glorify deities, Derinkuyu bears no marks of grandeur or dominance. It is a structure of concealment, defense, and fear, organized with cold rationality rather than symbolic expression. Those who built Derinkuyu appear to have willingly sacrificed sunlight, open space, and natural life in exchange for absolute security. This suggests a belief that the dangers above ground were not temporary, but could return at any time severe enough to make life on the surface unacceptable. When Derinkuyu was eventually abandoned and sealed, it carried those unanswered questions with it. It stands as a reminder that human history is not solely a story of progress and enlightenment, but also one of periods when survival demanded withdrawal preparation and life in darkness for reasons we still do not fully understand. Puma Punku is one of those archaeological sites that forces scientists and researchers of ancient history to repeatedly question the limits of human knowledge. Located on the harsh Altiplano Plateau of Bolivia at an altitude of more than 3,800 meters above sea level, this site does not impress by sheer scale like the Egyptian pyramids, nor by the grandeur of ancient Roman cities. Instead, it astonishes us with something far more difficult to explain: a level of stone craftsmanship so precise that it appears completely out of place in its supposed era. Among all the mysteries surrounding Puma Punku, the most striking and controversial is its system of incredibly complex geometric stone blocks, cut with near-perfect accuracy, far exceeding what is typically attributed to ancient civilizations. How could an ancient civilization achieve such precision without modern tools? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The stone blocks of Puma Punku clearly defy any interpretation of random or primitive construction. Each block reveals deliberate geometric intent, taking the form of precisely cut H-shaped and T-shaped elements, complex polyhedral stones, and surfaces carved with straight grooves, stepped recesses, drilled holes, and perfectly parallel planes. What elevates these stones from impressive to truly mysterious is the repetition of these features with striking consistency. Identical angles, proportions, and depths appear across multiple blocks, often separated by distance, yet matching as if guided by the same design standard. Such uniformity strongly implies the existence of a predefined architectural system rather than individual improvisation. The extremely small margin of error suggests that the builders were capable of accurate measurement and controlled stone shaping at a level rarely associated with ancient societies. This degree of geometric discipline points to advanced planning, standardized design principles, and a deep understanding of spatial relationships, challenging long-held assumptions about the technological limits of early civilizations. A closer examination of the stonework at Puma Punku reveals a level of surface finishing that is deeply unsettling for modern researchers. Many stone faces are flawlessly polished, forming perfectly flat planes that meet at sharply defined right angles. Long grooves run straight and uniform across hard stone, showing no signs of wavering or uneven pressure. Achieving such precision consistently would be demanding even with modern cutting tools, yet conventional archaeology maintains that the builders of Puma Punku possessed no iron implements, no powered machinery, and no advanced abrasives. Instead, they are believed to have relied on stone tools and soft metal alloys. The contrast between these presumed limitations and the extraordinary quality of the finished stonework is stark. It suggests a mastery of technique control and planning that cannot be easily reconciled with known technological capabilities of the period. This disconnect between available tools and observable results is precisely what places Puma Punku among the most challenging and controversial enigmas in archaeological research. Particularly controversial are the famous H-shaped blocks of Puma Punku. These blocks are not only visually striking, but also reveal a highly systematic design philosophy. The grooves, holes, and steps carved into them appear to be engineered to interlock with extreme precision, as if they were modular components of a much larger structure. This strongly suggests that Puma Punku was not an improvised construction, but the product of a complex architectural plan requiring close coordination between design measurement and execution. Beyond their complex geometry, the stone blocks of Puma Punku reveal an extraordinary mastery of stone joining without the use of mortar. Many joints are fitted so precisely that even a thin blade cannot be inserted between them, creating connections that appear almost seamless. The contact surfaces are carefully shaped to distribute weight evenly, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of load transfer and structural balance. Rather than relying on binding materials, the builders engineered the stones themselves to lock together through precision alone. Such accuracy implies deliberate planning and repeated testing, not trial and error. This method of construction goes far beyond decorative stone carving. It reflects advanced engineering principles involving geometry, mechanical stability, and material behavior principles rarely associated with ancient architectural traditions. The challenge of Puma Punku extends far beyond stone carving and into the realm of transportation, where the mystery deepens significantly. Many of the site's massive stone blocks weigh dozens, and in some cases, more than 100 tons. Yet geological studies indicate that their source quarries lie many kilometers away. Transporting such enormous stones would have required moving them across the uneven high-altitude terrain of the Andes Plateau, an environment marked by thin air, extreme weather, and limited natural resources. No clear evidence has been found of roads, ramps, wheeled vehicles, or large draft animals capable of such labor. If human effort alone was responsible, it would have demanded an extraordinary level of organization, coordination, and mechanical ingenuity. The ability not only to move these stones, but to do so without damaging their precisely cut forms, raises serious questions about the methods and technologies available to the builders of Puma Punku. One of the most revealing, yet often overlooked features of Puma Punku is the deliberate use of metal clamps embedded directly into carved stone channels. These clamps, made from copper-based alloys, were poured in molten form into precisely shaped grooves, permanently locking adjacent stone blocks together. This technique required not only metallurgical knowledge but also careful planning, as the stone cavities had to be shaped in advance to accommodate the metal fittings. Far from being decorative, these clamps played a crucial structural role, increasing stability and resistance to shifting forces. The intentional integration of stone and metal suggests a sophisticated understanding of material behavior, thermal properties, and structural engineering. Such complexity strongly challenges the idea that Puma Punku was built by a technologically primitive society. The dating of Puma Punku remains highly controversial. While many studies place the site between 1,000 and 2,000 years before the Common Era, the extreme sophistication of its geometric stonework has led some researchers to suspect that Puma Punku may be far older. If this is true, then Puma Punku is not merely an archaeological site, but evidence that human history may be far more complex and non-linear than traditional textbooks suggest. What is particularly intriguing is that Puma Punku appears to have never been fully completed or was destroyed by a major event unrecorded in historical sources. Many stone blocks lie scattered as if construction was abruptly abandoned mid-process. This raises troubling questions about the fate of its builders, what caused their disappearance, and why did a civilization capable of producing such perfect geometric stonework leave so little trace in written history. Ultimately, Puma Punku is not just an archaeological site, it is a direct challenge to how we understand the past. Its complex geometric stone blocks force modern humans to confront an uncomfortable possibility that civilizations with technical capabilities and design thinking far beyond what we typically assign to ancient societies may once have existed. Puma Punku, with its impossibly precise stonework, still stands as an open question waiting for answers from the future. Machu Picchu rises from the clouds like a question carved in stone. Perched high in the Andes, hidden for centuries from the outside world, this ancient city is not merely a masterpiece of engineering, it is a puzzle that refuses to be solved. Every precisely cut block, every terrace clinging to the mountainside, and every silent pathway seems to suggest purpose, intention, and knowledge far beyond what history comfortably explains. Yet despite decades of research, one fundamental question still echoes through the ruins: why was Machu Picchu truly built? No written records survive to tell its story. No definitive answers remain. What endures instead is an unsettling sense that this place was never meant to be fully understood, only discovered, questioned, and wondered at. In your opinion, what was Machu Picchu truly built? For a sacred ceremonial site, a hidden center of knowledge, or a purpose humanity has yet to understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Built at an altitude exceeding 2,400 meters above sea level, Machu Picchu occupies a location that seems deliberately chosen to challenge both nature and reason. Surrounded by steep mountain ridges, dense cloud forests, and deep river valleys, the site is extremely difficult to access even by modern standards. Transporting massive stone blocks to such a height without wheeled vehicles, draft animals, or metal tools would have required extraordinary planning and coordination. Daily life in this isolated environment posed constant challenges, from food production to water management and communication with the outside world. These conditions strongly suggest that Machu Picchu was not built for convenience or defense alone, but for a purpose important enough to justify immense effort, risk, and resources, raising profound questions about what motivated the Inca to establish such a complex settlement in one of the most inhospitable yet carefully chosen locations imaginable. The stonework of Machu Picchu represents a level of precision that remains difficult to fully explain. Massive blocks of granite were shaped so accurately that they interlock seamlessly without mortar metal clamps or binding materials of any kind. Each stone was carved individually to fit its neighbors, creating joints so tight that even thin blades cannot pass between them. This method was not merely aesthetic, it was structural. By allowing the stones to distribute weight evenly and shift slightly during seismic activity, the walls gained remarkable resilience. Such construction reveals not only exceptional craftsmanship, but also an advanced understanding of physics, material behavior, and long-term stability in one of the most earthquake-prone regions of the Andes. The fact that Machu Picchu has remained standing after centuries of powerful seismic activity further highlights the sophistication of Inca construction thinking, in which stone blocks were designed to shift slightly and then settle back into place rather than rigidly resisting natural forces. The water management system of Machu Picchu stands as one of the clearest indicators of deliberate long-term planning rather than spontaneous construction. A network of stone channels, fountains, and underground drainage was carefully engineered to operate entirely by gravity, delivering clean water consistently throughout the year. At the same time, excess rainwater was efficiently redirected away from buildings and terraces, preventing erosion, landslides, and structural failure on the steep mountainside. Remarkably, a significant portion of the site's construction lies beneath the surface, hidden in layers of drainage stone designed to stabilize the terrain. This seamless integration of hydrology, architecture, and landscape reveals that Machu Picchu was conceived as a unified system, where survival, durability, and environmental balance were planned from the very beginning. Machu Picchu reveals a deliberate and sophisticated relationship with the sky, suggesting that astronomy played a central role in its design. Several structures and ceremonial spaces were carefully oriented to track the sun's movement during key moments of the year, such as solstices and equinoxes. Light and shadow were used as precise markers of time, turning stone architecture into a functional calendar. These alignments indicate that celestial cycles were deeply integrated into Inca ritual life governance and worldview, reinforcing the idea that Machu Picchu was conceived as a place where the cosmos and the earthly realm were intentionally brought into harmony. Above all technical achievements and architectural brilliance, the deepest mystery of Machu Picchu lies in the unresolved question of its true purpose. No written records from the Inca civilization have survived to explain why this vast and complex site was built, leaving modern researchers dependent on interpretation rather than certainty. One long-standing theory suggests Machu Picchu functioned as a royal retreat for Emperor Pachacuti and the Inca elite. Yet this explanation struggles to account for the site's extreme isolation, immense labor investment, and intricate infrastructure which far exceed what would be necessary for seasonal residence or leisure. Other scholars argue that Machu Picchu was a major religious and ceremonial center, designed as a sacred space for communication with the sun deity and mountain spirits believed to govern the natural world. However, the presence of permanent housing, agricultural terraces capable of sustaining long-term populations, and sophisticated water systems challenges the idea that it served only periodic rituals. Some interpretations propose that Machu Picchu functioned as an elite training or residential center where specialized knowledge of astronomy, ritual practice, and state administration was preserved and transmitted. Still, there is no direct evidence to confirm this role. Increasingly, researchers consider the possibility that Machu Picchu was never meant to serve a single practical function at all. Instead, it may have been conceived as a symbolic landscape, a sacred city reflecting Inca cosmology, where architecture, terrain, and celestial alignment were deliberately unified to embody cosmic order. If this is the case, Machu Picchu was not built simply to be used, but to represent an idea, one that modern science can observe but may never fully decode. Machu Picchu appears to have been abandoned surprisingly soon after its construction, leaving behind no clear evidence of warfare, fire, or violent destruction. Archaeological findings suggest an orderly departure rather than a sudden collapse, deepening the mystery surrounding why such a carefully planned and resource-intensive site was left behind. This raises the possibility that its abandonment was driven by profound political shifts within the Inca elite, major social reorganization, or spiritual changes that rendered the site obsolete or forbidden. Even more puzzling is the fact that Machu Picchu vanished almost entirely from historical memory. Spanish chroniclers, who documented many Inca cities in detail, never mentioned its existence. This absence has led some scholars to suspect that the site was intentionally hidden, protected or deliberately excluded from imperial and colonial records, allowing Machu Picchu to remain silent and untouched for centuries. This silence, combined with powerful yet incomplete physical evidence, has turned Machu Picchu into an open question spanning generations. Even today, despite extensive archaeological and scientific research, the true purpose of Machu Picchu has never been conclusively explained. Perhaps it is precisely this ambiguity that has made it one of the most compelling and haunting mysteries of the ancient world. Napa Iglacia is one of the most mysterious ancient sites hidden within the sacred valley of the Andes, near Ollantaytambo, yet it remains largely overlooked in mainstream discussions of Inca civilization. Not as massive as Machu Picchu, nor as famous as Saksaywaman, Napa Iglacia leaves a different kind of impression. Quiet, secluded, and filled with architectural details that force us to question what ancient civilizations truly knew. Its very location suggests it was never intended for the general population. Reaching Napa Iglacia requires leaving familiar tourist paths and crossing steep, rugged terrain, as if the structure was deliberately placed where only those who were permitted could arrive. This immediately implies that Napa Iglacia was not a public temple, not a ceremonial plaza, and not a residential space, but rather a place reserved for special, perhaps even secret activities. If Napa Iglacia was neither a temple, nor a fortress, nor an observatory, what do you think its true purpose was, and why was it never recorded in history? The most astonishing aspect of Napa Iglacia, when examined closely, is its level of stone craftsmanship, one that far exceeds the familiar standards typically associated with Inca architecture. The stones here were not merely rough-shaped, but worked with near-perfect precision. Smooth, flat surfaces, sharply defined edges, clear right angles, and grooves that run straight and symmetrically in a way that feels almost unsettling. Most remarkably, the entire structure was assembled without mortar or any binding material, yet the stones fit together so tightly that it is nearly impossible to slip even a thin blade between them. This raises profound questions about the tools and techniques available to the ancient builders. As such, precision normally requires advanced measurement methods and exceptional control over cutting force. The most striking feature is the stone doorway carved deeply into a single solid block, displaying carefully balanced geometric proportions and an exquisitely finished surface. What makes this doorway especially intriguing is that it does not lead into any clearly functional interior space, leading many researchers to believe that it was never intended for practical use, but rather served as a symbolic, ritualistic, or philosophical gateway, one that reflects a complex architectural mindset still not fully understood today. One of the elements that makes Napa Iglacia particularly difficult to explain is the clear inconsistency in its architectural style. Upon closer examination, researchers have observed that while some stone blocks display features typical of known Inca construction techniques, many others exhibit a level of craftsmanship and design logic that is entirely different. These stones show higher precision, more refined surface finishing, and construction characteristics that do not appear to follow standard Inca building conventions. This contrast has led to an important hypothesis. Napa Iglacia may have existed prior to the Inca civilization, with the Inca later taking over, modifying, or completing an older structure. This idea is not unprecedented in the Andes, where sites such as Puma Punku and Tiwanaku also reveal evidence of multiple construction phases, often showing a decline in technical sophistication over time. If this hypothesis is correct, then Napa Iglacia is not merely an Inca monument, but a surviving remnant of a pre-Inca civilization, one that disappeared while taking with it forms of knowledge that modern history has yet to fully reconstruct. All of these factors, its isolated location, extraordinary stoneworking, unusual architecture, and possible astronomical alignments ultimately lead to a single central question, and the greatest mystery of Napa Iglacia: what was its true purpose? To this day, no historical documents, Inca chronicles or colonial-era records clearly describe the function of Napa Iglacia. It is never identified as a major religious center, never described as a fortress, and shows no clear signs of everyday life. Numerous hypotheses have emerged in an effort to explain the true purpose of Napa Iglacia, yet none have so far been supported by enough evidence to be considered definitive. Some researchers suggest that it was a secret ceremonial temple reserved exclusively for high-ranking priests of Inca society, or possibly of an even earlier civilization, where rituals connected to the sun deity or supreme cosmic forces were performed. Others interpret Napa Iglacia as an initiation space, a place where selected individuals underwent profound spiritual rites, marking a transformation in status knowledge or social role. More boldly, some theories propose that the famous stone doorway was never designed for physical passage at all, but instead held deep symbolic meaning, representing a boundary between worlds, between the material and the sacred, between life and death, or between humanity and the cosmos. In addition, another line of interpretation argues that the overall layout of Napa Iglacia is closely linked to astronomy, functioning as a tool for observing solar cycles, solstices, equinoxes, or other significant celestial phenomena encoded with remarkable subtlety into sacred architecture rather than expressed through conventional observational instruments. What is most striking is that none of these theories possess enough evidence to be considered a definitive explanation. Napa Iglacia seems to exist outside all familiar categories. It is not entirely a temple, not clearly an observatory, not a fortress, and not a form of civic architecture. This ambiguity raises a deeper question: are we imposing modern frameworks of understanding onto a structure created by a completely different way of thinking? It is possible that the true purpose of Napa Iglacia lies beyond the conceptual boundaries used by conventional history. One factor that further deepens the mystery of Napa Iglacia is the fact that the site has received remarkably little scholarly attention relative to its apparent significance. To date, large-scale excavations have been extremely limited, and interdisciplinary research combining archaeology, architecture, and materials science has yet to be fully developed. Even modern technologies, such as three-dimensional scanning and microscopic material analysis, have only been applied at a very preliminary level. As a result, Napa Iglacia seems suspended between history and oblivion, like a crucial fragment that has never been properly placed within the broader picture of Andean civilization. Many who have examined the site firsthand share the same impression: Napa Iglacia does not resemble a structure that comfortably belongs to its supposed historical period. The precision of its stonework, its geometric logic, and its spatial design evoke the sense of a lost body of knowledge and architecture shaped by understandings that modern society is only now beginning to question and reconsider with seriousness. Because its true purpose remains unexplained, Napa Iglacia has become a symbol of the limits of historical knowledge itself. It serves as a reminder that despite scientific progress, there are still ancient structures that resist simple explanations. Napa Iglacia is not merely a stone ruin. It is an open question about ancient people, about lost civilizations, and about forms of knowledge that may once have existed only to vanish with time. At first glance, Tambomachay looks unassuming, small, quiet, almost insignificant when compared to the monumental ruins surrounding Cusco. Yet behind its modest appearance lies a level of engineering precision that continues to challenge modern scientific understanding. This is not a place defined by size or grandeur, but by accuracy measured in millimeters, and decisions carved permanently into stone. The true enigma of Tambomachay emerges when we examine its extraordinarily advanced dry stone masonry, a technique so refined that even with today's tools, replicating it exactly would be far from simple. In this seemingly humble structure, the Inca reveal a mastery of stone geometry and natural forces that raises a profound question: how did a civilization without metal tools, wheels, or written plans achieve a level of construction that still resists full explanation? If the Inca had no metal tools, no wheels, and no written plans, how do you think they achieved such extreme precision in stone construction? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Unlike most ancient structures that relied on mortar or binding materials to ensure stability, Tambomachay was built entirely using dry stone masonry, where stone blocks are held together solely by weight geometry and absolute precision in craftsmanship. Notably, the outer surfaces of the stones were not elaborately polished for decorative purposes, yet the internal contact faces were shaped with exceptional accuracy. These joints are so tight that they leave almost no gaps, creating a structure that is both remarkably stable and resilient to the effects of time and seismic activity. This level of refinement is not accidental, but the result of a carefully calculated engineering system, revealing that the Inca placed absolute priority on function and long-term durability far beyond mere aesthetic considerations. The precision of stone masonry at Tambomachay is not merely aesthetic or symbolic, but a critical factor for the survival of the entire hydraulic system. Tambomachay was designed to allow water to flow continuously through channels and grooves, carved directly into stone, requiring absolute accuracy in calculating slope flow direction and water pressure. Even a minor error in cutting, fitting, or alignment would have been enough to cause leakage, blockage, or imbalance in the system. Yet evidence shows that this hydraulic network has functioned reliably for centuries, despite earthquakes, heavy rainfall, and the relentless effects of natural erosion. This demonstrates that the Inca did not simply know how to place stones, but deeply understood how stone responds to gravity, water, and terrain, as well as how to distribute forces so that a structure could remain both stable and flexible in the face of geological movement. The stone-fitting technique at Tambomachay reaches an exceptional level of sophistication through the use of irregular polygonal blocks rather than simple rectangular forms that are easier to construct. Each stone possesses a unique shape, forcing Inca craftsmen to calculate every contact surface with extreme precision so that the blocks interlock like a complex three-dimensional structure. This process demanded advanced spatial thinking, the ability to visualize geometry mentally, and an extraordinary level of craftsmanship, as even a minor miscalculation could destabilize the entire system. Although labor-intensive and time-consuming, this method offered a crucial advantage in an earthquake-prone environment, allowing the stones to undergo subtle micro-movements that absorb seismic energy without causing structural collapse. This was not merely a construction technique, but a fusion of geometric knowledge, practical experience, and deep adaptation to the geological conditions of the Andes. What makes Tambomachay particularly difficult to explain is that all of this refined construction technique was achieved in a context where the Inca had no hard metal tools to cut stone, did not use wheels to transport heavy blocks, lacked a written language to preserve technical drawings, and possessed no precise measuring instruments such as levels or optical devices. Despite these limitations, they still achieved near-perfect accuracy in stone fitting and geometric alignment. This raises a fundamental question: how was such complex construction knowledge transmitted through hands-on practice, ritualized tradition, or multi-generational training? And how long did it take for the Inca to develop an engineering system that reached such an extraordinary level of refinement? The sophistication of stone masonry at Tambomachay becomes even more difficult to explain when considered within the context of the site's relatively modest scale and the complete absence of overt displays of power commonly seen in other royal Inca architectures. There are no massive defensive walls, no grand plazas, nor political monuments intended to impress or dominate visually. Instead, Tambomachay appears to have been built not to overwhelm the eye, but to serve a highly specific function that demanded absolute precision. This suggests that the true value of the site lay in its functionality and ritual significance, likely connected to sacred water ceremonies or a sanctified space reserved for the Inca elite. It is precisely this restraint and quiet purpose that makes Tambomachay an unassuming structure, one where technical mastery reaches its peak without the need for outward display. In the Inca worldview, water was not merely a resource for daily life or agriculture, but a sacred entity, deeply connected to life itself, the cycles of the seasons, and the order of the universe. Guiding water through stone blocks fitted with absolute precision at Tambomachay therefore carried meaning far beyond technical function alone. It embodied profound symbolic significance. The carefully controlled flow of water through stone reflects an Inca vision of harmony between humanity, nature, and supernatural forces, where architecture served as a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual beliefs at the core of Inca civilization. Viewed from a broader perspective, Tambomachay cannot be regarded merely as a water management structure for daily use or ritual practice. Rather, it stands as clear evidence that the Inca possessed a profound system of knowledge concerning materials, terrain, and the laws of nature. Here, stone and water do not exist as separate elements, but are deliberately integrated to function in long-term harmony, almost as if the system had been programmed in advance. It is precisely this mortarless stonework, both enduring over time and astonishingly precise, that has turned Tambomachay into one of the great unresolved questions of Inca archaeology. Is this site simply the result of patient manual labor refined across generations, or does it represent a sophisticated body of construction knowledge that modern society has yet to fully comprehend? In the heart of bustling Cusco, once the beating center of the mighty Inca Empire, stands a structure that might seem like nothing more than ancient ruins. But Coricancha is far more than just an old temple. It is a gateway into cosmic mysteries that modern humanity has yet to decode. You may have heard its name, the Golden Courtyard, where walls were once plated with pure gold to reflect the sun's brilliance, but that is only the surface. Hidden within Coricancha lies a concealed astronomical system where beams of light, massive stones, and invisible lines function like an ancient timekeeping machine. It challenges our modern intellect and whispers to us of a lost knowledge that vanished with the Incas. Do you think the Incas truly understood the universe better than we give them credit for? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on this ancient mystery. Although the Inca lacked a complex writing system, telescopes, or astronomical clocks like other civilizations, the remnants at Coricancha reveal a truly remarkable and advanced understanding of astronomy. The temple's walls were not just architectural features for rituals, they were arranged with astonishing precision, perfectly aligned with major cosmic events, such as solstices, lunar cycles, and the movement of star constellations. Coricancha functioned as a solar observatory, where priests could track the sun's rays as they passed through meticulously designed windows. On exact days, like the winter or summer solstice, sunlight would strike specific points within the temple as if the entire structure had been programmed to synchronize with the cosmos. This raises a profound question. How could a civilization with no modern tools possibly grasp and harness celestial movements so precisely? One of the most astonishing structures is Puma Punku, the Sun Gate, which is perfectly aligned with the sunrise on the winter solstice. Not just one, but multiple spots within Coricancha functioned as observatories, with light filtering through stone windows to strike exact walls or surfaces. As the seasons shifted, so did the angle and path of the light, forming a living cosmic clock made entirely of stone, with no need for mechanical gears or instruments. One of the most mysterious and sophisticated elements hidden in the design of Coricancha is the seke system, consisting of 42 straight lines, radiating from the temple like the spokes of a giant wheel. Along each seke were dozens of sacred points, called huacas, many of which are believed to be linked to astronomical phenomena. According to researchers, this system was not just a religious map used to locate ritual centers, but also a miniature cosmic map, reflecting how the Inca envisioned the order of the universe. Notably, many huacas appear to have functioned as living time markers tied to planting and harvesting cycles, ceremonial dates, or climate shifts, all based on celestial observations rather than mere belief. With Coricancha at its center, the entire seke system may be understood as a massive astronomical calendar, allowing the Inca to synchronize social life and agriculture with signals from the stars. One of the most puzzling aspects for modern researchers is this: the Inca achieved all of this without any modern tools. They had no wheels, no iron or steel, no telescopes or astronomical clocks. Yet they possessed the ability to observe and align celestial bodies with accuracy down to individual degrees and days. The fact that sunlight could strike a specific point inside the temple exactly on the solstice is no coincidence. It reflects a body of knowledge carefully accumulated, tested, and passed down through generations. Some scholars have even proposed that the entire city of Cusco was designed as a miniature model of the cosmos, with Coricancha serving as the solar center from which light energy and life radiated outward in every direction. This suggests that the Inca not only observed the heavens, they deeply understood the profound connection between the universe and human existence. One of the most astonishing aspects of Coricancha is how the Inca encoded their astronomical knowledge directly into their religious architecture. Unlike many civilizations that built temples solely for worship, Coricancha was a place where every stone carried cosmic meaning. The stone walls were joined seamlessly without mortar, with precisely cut surfaces and calculated angles designed to align with the sun's position during specific times of the year. When the Spanish conquered Cusco, they destroyed the upper portion of the temple and built the Santo Domingo Monastery on top, a clear act of cultural domination. Yet the Inca foundations remained standing firm through centuries of earthquakes and time. These very stones continue to reveal mysterious spatial laws alignments that even modern technology is only beginning to understand. Beyond its astronomical function, Coricancha stands as a vivid symbol of the cultural clash between the Inca and Spanish empires. A Catholic church looms above, while ancient unmortared stones remain firmly rooted below. This layered architecture represents not just physical destruction, but a symbolic confrontation between two belief systems, native spirituality and imposed religion. And even though the upper structure changed, the foundation, where cosmic knowledge is coded into stone, endures. Today, many visitors to Coricancha may see only an old church and a few ancient stone walls, but at specific times of the year, when sunlight hits at just the right angle, something extraordinary happens. The light doesn't simply illuminate, it passes through narrow slits precisely carved into the stone, striking predetermined points to create intentional light effects, as if the architecture itself had been programmed to communicate with the cosmos. Coricancha is not merely a ruin, it is a living cosmic observatory, preserving the Inca's deep astronomical worldview through the language of shadow light and stone. Coricancha raises a profound question. How did the Incas achieve such astronomical precision without modern tools? Did they observe the skies for centuries, building a legacy of unwritten knowledge, or did they inherit a system of cosmic transmission that remains undeciphered today? Whatever the answer, Coricancha transcends the definition of a temple. It is a symbol of humanity's connection to the cosmos, etched into every stone and every ray of light. If Machu Picchu is the proud monument atop the sacred mountains, then Coricancha is the silent, contemplative heart of the Inca world, a place where every stone records data, every gap measures time, and every shaft of light carries a message from the stars. High on the wind-scoured Altiplano near the frozen waters of Lake Titicaca lies the silent stone remains of Tiwanaku, a place that should not exist as it does. At an altitude where survival itself is a challenge, an ancient civilization once built monumental architecture with astonishing precision aligned its city to the movements of the sun and shaped stone as if guided by principles far ahead of its time. Yet Tiwanaku left behind no written history, no clear record of its rise, and most disturbingly, no explanation for its fall. Archaeologists have studied its ruins for generations, but the deeper they look, the stranger the story becomes. A powerful ceremonial and political center once stood here commanding influence across the Andes. And then, almost without warning, it was abandoned. No great war, no visible cataclysm, just silence. The question that continues to haunt researchers is not how Tiwanaku was built, but why a civilization capable of such achievements disappeared so suddenly, leaving behind only stone and an unanswered mystery. What do you think truly caused the sudden disappearance of Tiwanaku? Climate, internal collapse, or something we still don't understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. At its peak, Tiwanaku was not merely a settlement or a city, but the beating heart of a highly organized civilization that exerted cultural, political, and religious influence across vast regions of the Andes. Its layout reveals deliberate and sophisticated planning, where architecture, landscape, and sky were woven into a single symbolic system. Major structures were carefully aligned with solar events, such as solstices and equinoxes, suggesting that astronomy was not a peripheral interest, but a foundational pillar of Tiwanaku society. Sites like Calakpuma functioned as monumental observatories, while the Gate of the Sun appears to encode calendrical and cosmological knowledge in stone, reflecting a deep understanding of solar cycles and timekeeping. Yet the greatest enigma lies at Puma Punku, where stoneworking reaches a level of precision that defies easy explanation. Enormous blocks were carved into complex interlocking forms with standardized dimensions, sharp internal angles, and perfectly flat surfaces, features that resemble modular construction techniques more commonly associated with modern engineering. These stones appear less like products of trial-and-error craftsmanship and more like components designed according to predefined technical principles. What makes this especially perplexing is the lack of convincing archaeological evidence for tools or technologies capable of producing such results under conventional assumptions. As a result, Puma Punku stands as a stark reminder that Tiwanaku's technical and intellectual capabilities may still be profoundly underestimated. Despite these architectural, technological, and astronomical enigmas, they are not what troubles researchers the most. The most haunting mystery lies in how this civilization vanished. Around the beginning of the second millennium, AD, Tiwanaku declined with remarkable speed. There is no clear evidence of large-scale invasion, no signs of widespread warfare, nor thick layers of ash or destruction debris that would indicate a sudden natural catastrophe, such as an earthquake or volcanic eruption. The city appears to have been abandoned, as if its inhabitants departed within a relatively short period of time, leaving behind monumental stone structures and an enormous unanswered question. One of the most compelling explanations for the collapse of Tiwanaku centers on a dramatic shift in climate that gradually turned a once supportive environment into a source of instability. Geological evidence and sediment cores taken from the Lake Titicaca Basin suggest that the region experienced a prolonged and severe drought beginning around the end of Tiwanaku's peak. As water levels dropped, the finely balanced ecological system on which the civilization depended began to unravel. Tiwanaku's agricultural success relied heavily on an advanced network of raised fields designed to manage frost flooding and soil moisture in the high-altitude Andes. When rainfall patterns changed and water became scarce, these systems likely failed, leading to declining crop yields and increasing food insecurity. Such environmental stress would have placed enormous pressure on a society built around centralized planning, ritual authority, and surplus production. Yet climate alone does not fully resolve the mystery. Other Andean societies faced similar environmental challenges and managed to adapt, while Tiwanaku's core ceremonial and political centers were abruptly abandoned. This suggests that drought may have acted not as a single cause, but as a catalyst, triggering deeper social, economic, and ideological fractures that ultimately pushed the civilization beyond recovery. Another line of interpretation points toward an internal crisis of belief that may have quietly unraveled Tiwanaku from within. If the city truly functioned as a sacred cosmological center, where political authority, social order, and religious legitimacy were inseparably linked, then stability depended heavily on the perceived harmony between ritual practice and the natural world. Astronomical accuracy, seasonal predictability, and ceremonial success were not symbolic gestures, but foundations of power. Any sustained disruption, whether failed harvests, unexpected climatic shifts, or inaccuracies in ritual calendars, could have shattered public confidence in the elite who claimed divine or cosmic authority. In such a system, loss of belief would not merely weaken leadership, it would undermine the entire social framework. Once rituals no longer aligned with reality, Tiwanaku may have ceased to function as the spiritual axis of its world, prompting its people to abandon the center that had lost its sacred meaning. What makes Tiwanaku especially striking is that it did not disappear in the typical manner observed with many ancient civilizations. There is no clear evidence that it was directly replaced by a successor culture. Instead, its influence appears to have fragmented and dispersed, leaving traces in later Andean societies, while the core center of Tiwanaku itself was never reoccupied or restored to its former role. The historical silence surrounding Tiwanaku's final phase has led many to wonder whether an event occurred that was too large, too unusual, or too incompatible with conventional historical models to be clearly recorded or identified using current archaeological methods. The combination of extraordinary engineering skill, precise astronomical knowledge, vast regional influence, and a sudden, poorly understood collapse has made Tiwanaku the focus of countless theories ranging from rigorous scientific interpretations to far more speculative ideas. Regardless of perspective, Tiwanaku stands as a powerful reminder that human history does not always follow simple or linear paths. Some civilizations rise to remarkable heights only to vanish, leaving behind cold stone monuments and questions that even today we are still unable to answer completely. Long before the rise of the Inca, and far from the world-famous ruins of Machu Picchu, lies a place few have heard of, but none who visit ever forget. Calakpuma, nestled in the remote highlands of Cajamarca, is not marked by grandeur or fame. Instead, it whispers. Through carved stones, without context, through stairways that lead into the mountain's silence, and through symbols etched into rock that no one has ever translated. There are no tourist crowds here, just unanswered questions, and the sense that something important, perhaps even world-changing, was left behind, waiting to be uncovered. Who built it? And most hauntingly, why? What do you think was the true purpose of Calakpuma? Was it an observatory, a sacred underground gate, or a forgotten site of spiritual experimentation? Share your thoughts in the comments. Perhaps your theory is the missing piece in this ancient mystery. Calakpuma is a strange archaeological site that seems to belong to no known civilization. Across the area, researchers have found large, carefully processed stone blocks, some carved into perfect rectangles, others shaped in unusual forms or arranged as stairways leading deep into the mountain. Strangely, there's no solid evidence linking the site to the Inca Mochi or Chavan III major cultures that once dominated the Andes. There are no distinct symbols, no pottery fragments, no legends or historical records tied to it. Calakpuma exists as a blank space on the archaeological map, an anomaly, like a puzzle piece that has fallen out of the grand picture of South American history. Its very presence raises a profound question. Who built this place? And why did they vanish, leaving behind an unfinished, nameless construction with no explanation? One of the most intriguing aspects of Calakpuma is the presence of symbols carved directly into the stone, deep, precise, and entirely unlike any form of modern graffiti. These carvings range from spirals and abstract geometric patterns to shapes that resemble human eyes, faces, or animals. Yet to this day, no one has been able to decipher their true meaning. Some researchers believe they are ancient religious symbols, while others suggest an astronomical interpretation, perhaps a map of the sky created by a lost civilization. Still, there are those who argue these symbols originate from a thought system far beyond modern human understanding. What makes them especially mysterious is their lack of repetition or any clear connection to other known ancient sites, making their interpretation more challenging and more enigmatic than ever. Another fascinating feature of Calakpuma is its deep rock fissures, underground caves, and carved stone stairways that seem to lead somewhere only to be buried by time and debris. Some independent researchers have suggested that this site might be part of an ancient tunnel network connecting sacred sites along the Andes, similar to what Quechua legends describe as the pathways of the gods Seques. Though no concrete evidence supports this yet, the theory adds to Calakpuma's allure, transforming it from a cluster of strange rocks into a potentially key location in a larger untold history of the Andes. One of the most debated and captivating aspects of Calakpuma is the absolute ambiguity surrounding its true function and purpose. Unlike other ancient sites, where it's relatively easy to identify a temple tomb or fortress, Calakpuma reveals no such clear signs. There are no altars, no human remains, no traces of domestic life or permanent structures. What remains are massive, worked stone block stairways carved deep into the mountain and fissures that resemble gateways to somewhere underground. This leads to the fundamental question, what was Calakpuma built for? Some theories suggest it was a secret ceremonial site reserved for a special priestly class and entirely disconnected from mainstream religion. Others believe it may have served as an astronomical observatory, with its stones aligned to solstices, equinoxes, or the movement of constellations. Still, some scholars propose a bold theory that Calakpuma was an open-air laboratory of an ancient civilization used for experimenting with stone carving techniques, measuring geomagnetic energies, or performing metaphysical rituals far beyond modern comprehension. Several stone blocks appear to be perfectly aligned along the east-west axis, and in some instances, they create striking light effects during sunrise or sunset on solstice days. If these alignments were intentional, then the builders must have possessed highly advanced knowledge of astronomy. But if it was all a coincidence, then the question arises, how were the cuts so symmetrical and precise? All these theories only deepen the mystery. With no supporting archaeological records, no historical documentation, and no cultural context to draw from, Calakpuma emerges as an isolated fragment from a forgotten world never recorded by human hands. Every stone, every crack, seems to ask a question that remains unanswered. No one can say for certain, and no one dares to fully dismiss it either. One of the features that makes Calakpuma truly remarkable is its astonishing stoneworking technique. Many of the stone blocks found here were carved with incredible precision. Straight, sharp cuts, smooth curves, and perfect right angles, all executed on extremely hard materials like granite or andesite. This raises a profound question: how could ancient people, with only stone tools or soft metals like copper commonly used at the time, have achieved such fine and intricate details? Some researchers suspect that a lost technology may have once existed, or that a completely different method was used, one that lies far outside our current understanding. While there is no definitive evidence yet, the craftsmanship at Calakpuma clearly challenges everything we think we know about the capabilities of prehistoric humans. Another puzzling aspect of Calakpuma is its complete absence from historical records, despite being located very close to Cajamarca, the site of a pivotal event, the capture of Inca Emperor Atahualpa by the Spanish. Given such a strategically important location, it's hard to believe that Calakpuma isn't mentioned in any Inca or Spanish colonial documents. This has led many to question, was this site once so secretive or so sacred that it was deliberately left unspoken? Or was it an off-the-grid location outside the official religious and political systems, reserved only for special rituals performed by a select few? This strange silence, in both legend and record, has rendered Calakpuma ghost-like, as if someone had intentionally erased it from our collective memory. To this day, Calakpuma remains largely unexcavated and understudied. There is a severe lack of funding, personnel, and governmental interest. As a result, it is slipping into obscurity, both literally and figuratively. This is unfortunate, for this place may hold the key to unlocking a chapter of human history that was never written down. High above the ancient city of Cusco, carved into unforgiving mountain terrain, stands Saksaywaman, a structure so vast and so precisely built that it immediately challenges everything we assume about ancient engineering. These are not modest stone walls raised by simple means, but colossal blocks weighing tens, sometimes hundreds of tons, assembled with a precision that rivals modern construction. And yet the civilization responsible for this feat possessed no wheel, no iron or steel tools, no large draft animals, and no written plans. The very existence of Saksaywaman forces an unsettling question: how could a society armed with such limited technology mobilize the labor coordination and endurance required to build something of this scale? It is here, in the overwhelming magnitude of the stones and the silence surrounding their construction, that the true mystery of Saksaywaman begins. So how do you think Saksaywaman was really built, with sheer human labor-lost techniques, or something we no longer understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thousands of massive stone blocks, many weighing tens of tons and some exceeding 100 tons, were quarried far from Saksaywaman and transported across extreme Andean terrain to reach the hilltop construction site. This route involved steep slopes, narrow mountain passes, deep ravines, and high-altitude conditions that would have severely limited human stamina and coordination. What makes this achievement so perplexing is the lack of archaeological evidence for paved roads designed for heavy transport wheeled vehicles, advanced pulley systems, or any form of mechanical lifting technology. Without draft animals or metal tools, the builders would have relied almost entirely on synchronized human effort, carefully planned movement, and an exceptional understanding of weight distribution and terrain dynamics. The successful relocation of each stone suggests not improvisation, but a highly disciplined system of logistics and collective knowledge that remains largely unexplained. All explanations for the construction of Saksaywaman ultimately converge on one unavoidable factor: human labor on an extraordinary scale. Yet what truly sets this site apart is not merely the number of people involved, but the level of organization required to sustain such labor over time. Estimates suggest that tens of thousands of workers may have been mobilized over several decades, possibly across multiple generations. Coordinating this effort would have demanded a highly sophisticated system for allocating tasks, rotating labor groups, supplying food and shelter, and maintaining discipline across a vast workforce. In a society without written records or modern administrative tools, this implies an advanced form of social management, where authority, obligation, and collective purpose were deeply embedded in daily life. Saksaywaman thus reflects not only physical endurance, but a level of organizational intelligence that rivals complex state systems. Saksaywaman, therefore, is not merely an architectural monument, but also tangible evidence that the Inca Empire possessed a highly cohesive and efficient social organization. Even so, accepting the hypothesis of large-scale collective labor does not fully resolve the problem. How could stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons be dragged, lifted, rotated, and set into place with near-perfect precision, featuring tightly interlocking surfaces without mortar using extremely limited tools? Working extremely hard stone with tools made from softer materials would normally be considered impractical, if not impossible. Yet Saksaywaman stands as direct evidence that such limits were somehow overcome. The stones used in its walls were not shaped into simple blocks, but carved into complex multi-angled, polygonal forms with irregular projections and recesses that interlock perfectly with neighboring stones. This level of precision suggests a construction process that relied on careful incremental shaping, repeated fitting, and constant adjustment rather than standardized cuts. Even a slight miscalculation could have rendered a massive block unusable, as errors could not be hidden or corrected with mortar. The result implies not only advanced stoneworking skill, but an exceptional ability to measure, anticipate stress points, and control error achievements that challenge conventional assumptions about pre-industrial engineering. The scale of labor at Saksaywaman therefore lies not only in the number of people involved, but also in the collective intelligence accumulated and transmitted across generations. Some scholars argue that the construction reflects a ritualized labor system in which building was not merely a practical task, but a sacred act that bound the community to the gods and to centralized authority. If this interpretation is correct, then the thousands who labored at Saksaywaman contributed not only physical strength, but also deep religious commitment and social obligation. This interpretation helps explain how such vast resources could be devoted to a project that appears to exceed ordinary practical needs, yet it also raises a deeper and more troubling question. Was Saksaywaman truly conceived and constructed entirely within the Inca period, or did the Inca encounter an existing structure and later adapt, expand, or repurpose it? Several of the largest stone blocks displaying the highest degree of precision and the most complex polygonal joints differ markedly from smaller, less refined sections of masonry. This contrast suggests that the site may have undergone multiple construction phases, potentially carried out under different technological capabilities, intentions, or even cultural frameworks. If so, Saksaywaman may represent not a single architectural vision, but the cumulative result of knowledge layered across time, an inherited monument whose original purpose and builders remain unknown. Regardless of which hypothesis proves closest to the truth, the immense scale and astonishing labor behind Saksaywaman remain a serious challenge to modern assumptions. The site forces us to reconsider long-held beliefs about the capabilities of ancient societies, and to acknowledge that people in the distant past may have possessed systems of organization techniques and knowledge that we have yet to fully understand. Ultimately, Saksaywaman is not merely an assemblage of massive stones, but a silent symbol of human strength, collective will, and a construction capacity that far exceeds what surviving historical records can explain. Hidden beneath one of the densest rainforests on Earth lies a city that once rivaled the greatest powers of the ancient world. Tikal was not a minor settlement, nor a forgotten outpost. It was a vast Maya megacity that dominated the political, religious, and ceremonial life of Central America for over 1,000 years. At its peak, towering temples pierced the sky, vast plazas echoed with ritual and power, and tens of thousands of people lived within an urban landscape engineered deep inside the jungle. Then, without a single dramatic collapse recorded in history, Tikal vanished. The forest closed in, swallowing stone by stone, until the city disappeared as if it had never existed. When modern explorers finally rediscovered Tikal centuries later, they uncovered more than ruins. They encountered a haunting mystery. How did the Maya build monumental structures of such scale and height in one of the most hostile environments imaginable? And why was a city of such power ultimately left to be reclaimed by the jungle? How could a civilization build a megacity like Tikal deep inside the jungle, and why would they ever abandon it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The most striking and perplexing feature of Tikal lies in the extraordinary height of its pyramids, which rise above the rainforest canopy like immense artificial mountains. Temples such as Temple and Temple the II, and most notably Temple 4, dominate the landscape, reaching heights that far exceed those of most other Maya structures. Temple 4, standing at nearly 70 meters, was not only the tallest structure in Tikal, but one of the tallest ever built in the ancient Americas. What makes this achievement truly remarkable is not merely the scale, but the environment in which it occurred. These pyramids were constructed deep within dense tropical rainforest, an area marked by uneven terrain, relentless humidity, heavy seasonal rainfall, and limited access to raw materials. The Maya possessed no metal tools, no wheeled transport, no draft animals, and no mechanical lifting devices. Every stone block, some weighing several tons, had to be quarried, shaped, transported, and positioned using human labor alone. Building vertically in such conditions defies conventional architectural logic, especially in a setting where maintaining stability against erosion and structural collapse would have been a constant challenge. The decision to construct such towering monuments suggests that height itself held profound symbolic importance, transforming the pyramids into deliberate statements of power, belief, and cosmic order rather than purely functional architecture. The mystery surrounding Tikal's colossal pyramids becomes even more difficult to explain when examining the level of precision involved in their design and construction. The structures here are far from crude piles of stacked stone. Instead, they are complex architectural systems featuring steep stairways, temples positioned at their summits, internal ceremonial spaces, and carefully calculated architectural axes. Notably, many of Tikal's temples demonstrate a close relationship with significant astronomical phenomena, such as the position of the sun at sunrise or sunset on specific days of the year. These alignments are unlikely to be coincidental and instead point to a well-developed body of astronomical knowledge that was deliberately accumulated and applied. For the Maya, architecture was not merely a response to practical needs or a display of political power, it was a means of linking social order with cosmic order. The pyramids thus functioned as intermediary spaces where humans could approach the divine, reenact celestial cycles, and affirm their place within a far greater structure of the universe. The unusual height of Tikal's pyramids also raises questions of practicality. In a dense rainforest environment, constructing such tall structures seems to defy conventional survival logic. Yet this very choice reveals how the Maya perceived power and space. From the tops of these temples, an endless sea of forest stretches in every direction, creating the sensation of standing at the boundary between earth and sky. The pyramids thus became physical symbols of cosmic order, places where kings and priests could perform rituals to maintain balance between supernatural forces. Their height was not merely intended to impress, it carried profound spiritual meaning, transforming architecture into an extension of ritual itself. Preserving Tikal's monumental pyramids within a tropical climate was an immense challenge that few ancient civilizations ever faced. Constant year-round humidity, heavy seasonal rainfall, and aggressive vegetation continuously caused erosion, cracking, and structural weakening of stone. Yet many of Tikal's structures have remained standing for centuries, demonstrating the Maya's deep understanding of materials and construction techniques. They carefully selected suitable limestone-treated stone surfaces to reduce water absorption and designed load-bearing structures capable of distributing weight efficiently. Foundations, walls, and stairways were deliberately arranged to resist subsidence and erosion. This achievement reflects not only a high level of technical skill, but also a powerful social organization capable of sustaining labor, preserving knowledge, and maintaining large-scale structures over long periods of time. Tikal, therefore, is not merely an archaeological ruin. It stands as evidence of the Maya civilization's engineering capability and its remarkably sustainable architectural thinking. The greatest paradox of Tikal lies not in its rise, but in its collapse. A city that once possessed the ability to mobilize vast labor resources and knowledge to construct colossal pyramids declined without leaving evidence of a single catastrophic event. Around the 9th century, Tikal gradually lost its position as a center of power in the Maya world. New ceremonial structures were no longer built, stone stelae ceased to record the achievements of kings, and the population began to abandon the city. Notably, there is no archaeological evidence indicating that Tikal was destroyed by large-scale warfare or sudden natural disaster. Instead, research points to a convergence of interconnected factors. Prolonged drought weakened a water system heavily dependent on rainfall. Resources were depleted under population pressure. Continuous military conflicts with rivals, such as Calakmul, destabilized the region. And most critically, faith in the divine authority of the ruling elite eroded. When kings were no longer seen as effective intermediaries between humans and the gods, the entire political and religious structure of Tikal began to fracture, leading to the quiet, yet irreversible dissolution of a megacity that had once dominated the region. Today, standing before the pyramids of Tikal, one sees more than the ruins of an ancient city. There is a striking contrast between monumental scale and historical fragility. These unusually tall structures, rising from the jungle, raise fundamental questions about the limits of ancient knowledge, the forces that drive humans to build far beyond basic survival needs, and why a civilization that reached such heights of technical and spiritual achievement could disappear almost entirely. Tikal, with its pyramids emerging above the forest canopy, remains a powerful reminder that humanity's past is far from simple, and that much about the civilizations that once ruled the ancient world still lies beyond our full understanding. High above Peru's sacred valley stands Ollantaytambo, a place that looks less like a finished city and more like a question carved in stone. Enormous blocks lie perfectly cut, yet never-set walls rise only to stop abruptly, and entire sections appear frozen in the middle of construction. For centuries, this site has been labeled a fortress or a ceremonial center of the Inca. But a closer look tells a far stranger story. Ollantaytambo does not feel abandoned after completion. It feels abandoned mid-thought, as if a vast and carefully planned project was suddenly halted without warning. Why would a civilization capable of such precision, scale, and engineering walk away from one of its most ambitious constructions? And what happened at Ollantaytambo that forced history itself to stop halfway through? Why do you think Ollantaytambo was abandoned before it was finished? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What truly sets Ollantaytambo apart from other Inca sites is the extraordinary level of precision achieved in its stone construction. Massive blocks weighing tens of tons were cut-shaped and fitted together with an accuracy so refined that even a thin blade cannot be inserted between the joints. These stones were assembled without mortar, relying instead on a complex natural locking geometry that distributes weight evenly and absorbs seismic vibrations. Such engineering allowed the structures to survive centuries of powerful earthquakes that devastated later colonial buildings. Achieving this level of precision would have required not only immense labor, but also advanced planning, mathematical understanding, and intimate knowledge of stone behavior under stress. Conventional archaeology struggles to explain how these results were achieved using only stone hammers, copper tools, and human muscle. Even more puzzling is the contrast between these perfected sections and nearby areas where stones remain partially carved or completely unused, suggesting that highly advanced techniques were being applied within a project that inexplicably was never brought to completion. Across many areas of Ollantaytambo, archaeologists have found stone blocks that were quarried and partially shaped but never placed into their final positions. Some lie scattered along pathways, others, meticulously carved, remain abandoned at quarries or midway along transport routes. Certain walls rise only a few stone courses before stopping entirely with no signs of continuation. This creates the impression that the site was not completed and later abandoned, but rather, construction was suddenly interrupted without any apparent plan to resume. The mystery deepens when considering that Ollantaytambo was not a minor or secondary structure. Its immense scale, strategic location, and the extraordinary investment of labor clearly mark it as a project of exceptional importance to the Inca. If the interruption had merely been due to a lack of resources or manpower, the Inca could have redirected efforts or at least completed the most critical components. Instead, many core elements were never finished, as if the entire original plan had been abruptly cancelled. The idea that Ollantaytambo's construction was halted by the Spanish conquest is often repeated, yet it becomes increasingly fragile under closer archaeological scrutiny. Several unfinished sections of the site appear to predate the Spaniards' arrival, indicating that construction had already slowed or stopped before direct military pressure occurred. More importantly, Inca architecture elsewhere demonstrates remarkable adaptability. In times of conflict, unfinished buildings were reinforced, repurposed, or rapidly modified for defense. At Ollantaytambo, however, this pattern is largely absent. Many incomplete walls were never strengthened, abandoned stones were not reused, and strategic positions were left structurally unfinished. This lack of emergency adaptation strongly suggests that warfare alone cannot explain the site's abandoned state. Rather than a sudden collapse under external threat, the evidence points toward a deeper disruption, possibly political, ideological, or organizational, that caused the project to lose its purpose before conflict made completion impossible. Another compelling explanation is that Ollantaytambo may not originate entirely from a single culture or historical phase. Several stone blocks and foundational elements differ noticeably from standard Inca construction, displaying larger scale, higher precision, and more refined surface finishing than surrounding structures. These features suggest techniques that appear more advanced than those typically attributed to Inca masonry. As a result, some researchers propose that the Inca may have inherited, reused, or built upon the remains of an earlier pre-Inca civilization. If this interpretation is correct, the site's unfinished appearance may not be due solely to interruption or collapse. Instead, it may reflect the Inca encountering a monumental design conceived by others, one they chose not or were unable to fully replicate or complete according to its original intent. Some scholars argue that Ollantaytambo served primarily a ritualistic or symbolic purpose rather than a practical one. In this view, the site's incompleteness may reflect a shift in religious, political, or astronomical beliefs. If the original purpose was tied to a specific celestial cycle, ceremonial function, or cosmological belief, then a change in ideology could have rendered the entire project obsolete, regardless of its monumental scale. This perspective reinforces the sense that Ollantaytambo was not merely architecture, but an unfinished declaration of worldview and power. The water management system at Ollantaytambo represents one of the most technically refined aspects of the entire site, and paradoxically, one of its greatest mysteries. Stone channels were carved directly into bedrock with remarkable precision, maintaining carefully controlled gradients that ensured stable flow without erosion or overflow. Such hydraulic accuracy suggests advanced planning, long-term intention, and a deep understanding of fluid dynamics. In ancient construction, systems of this complexity were typically implemented only after the overall layout and function of a site had been clearly defined. Yet at Ollantaytambo, this highly developed infrastructure exists alongside major architectural elements that were never completed. The deliberate investment in permanent, irreversible water engineering contrasts sharply with the abandonment of monumental stonework nearby. This contradiction raises a profound question. Did the site's original purpose change so drastically during construction that even a nearly finished hydraulic system was ultimately rendered unnecessary? Ultimately, the unfinished state of Ollantaytambo makes it resemble a historical record with missing pages. It does not tell a complete story, but instead leaves behind scattered fragments, stones cut but never used walls, begun but never finished, a grand vision without a conclusion. This very incompleteness transforms Ollantaytambo into one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. It is not merely a question of engineering or manpower, but a deeper inquiry into lost intentions, sudden disruptions, and forgotten knowledge of the civilizations that once occupied this place. Ollantaytambo, therefore, is not just an Inca ruin, it is evidence that history itself can be interrupted, leaving behind monumental works that were never meant to remain unfinished. At the edge of a barren coastal desert, where rain is almost unknown and survival itself is a constant struggle, a vast city once ruled without rival. Chan Chan was among the largest urban centers in all of pre-Columbian America, yet today it stands silent, stripped of answers. Built entirely from adobe rather than stone, without a great river at its side, and without reliable rainfall, this megacity defied every environmental rule of ancient urban life. For centuries, it functioned through rigid planning, enclosed ceremonial compounds, and a system of power so tightly controlled that every wall and corridor reflected authority. The Chimu covered these earthen surfaces with endless images of the sea waves, fishbirds, and nets, turning the ocean into both a sacred symbol and a declaration of dominance. And yet, despite this precision, despite this control, Chan Chan collapsed without a clear moment of destruction, without a final record, without a single agreed explanation. The greatest mystery is not how Chan Chan was built, but how a city so carefully designed could unravel and vanish almost without a trace. So what do you think truly caused Chan Chan to collapse so quietly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The decline of Chan Chan did not occur suddenly or as the result of a single catastrophic event, but unfolded as a prolonged, silent process that was difficult to perceive over time. Long before the Inca conquered the Chimu kingdom, multiple signs indicate that the city had already entered a phase of internal weakening. Complexes that once served administrative or ceremonial functions gradually lost their original roles, while certain structures were no longer maintained, left to erode under the combined effects of time and environment. Most critical of all were the disturbances that emerged within the water management system, the lifeline of the entire city. In a society wholly dependent on water transported from distant sources, even minor changes in flow could trigger cascading effects, destabilizing social order, economic activity, and religious practice. Archaeological evidence suggests that several canals, once carefully engineered, ceased to function not simply due to natural deterioration, but in ways that imply deliberate abandonment. This raises the possibility that the Chimu either lost the capacity to sustain their core technological systems or were forced to alter them amid an escalating crisis as structures of power and belief began to fracture from within. Climate change is often considered a key explanation for the decline of Chan Chan, particularly the impact of prolonged and unpredictable El Niño cycles. These phenomena could bring unusually heavy rainfall and violent flooding within short periods, powerful enough to destroy water canals and severely erode structures built entirely of adobe. This was often followed by extended droughts, making repair and recovery extremely difficult, if not impossible. In an urban system where every structure depended on environmental stability, even a sequence of consecutive extreme weather events could inflict widespread damage. However, climate alone cannot account for Chan Chan's collapse. The Chimu had previously demonstrated a high capacity for environmental adaptation and control sufficient to cope with ordinary natural fluctuations. The failure to rebuild Chan Chan after such disasters suggests that the problem extended beyond nature itself, reflecting deeper crises embedded within the city's social structure, economic foundations, and systems of power crises that ultimately stripped the civilization of its ability to recover. One important hypothesis suggests that the collapse of Chan Chan stemmed from a profound crisis of power and belief. As water became increasingly scarce and rituals intended to appease the sea or summon rain ceased to produce results, the legitimacy of the Chimu ruling elite may have been severely undermined. In a society where authority was inseparably linked to the ability to control resources and maintain cosmic order, the loss of control over water represented not merely a technical failure, but a spiritual collapse as well. This may help explain the rise of large-scale sacrificial rituals discovered near Chan Chan, including the sacrifice of children. Such extreme actions reflect a society pushed to its final limits, where people were willing to surrender what they held most precious in a desperate hope that a lost order might somehow be restored. The Inca conquest is often regarded as the definitive end of the Chimu civilization, yet substantial evidence suggests it was merely the final chapter of a decline that had begun long before. By the time the Inca reached Chan Chan, the city may no longer have retained its former status as a strong and stable center of power. A city that relied heavily on a finely tuned system of water control, ritual authority, and social order, but had lost the ability to sustain those foundations, would have become especially vulnerable to any external force. Therefore, the fall of Chan Chan was not simply the result of war or invasion, but the culmination of multiple overlapping crises, environmental, technological, social, and spiritual, that had quietly eroded the city from within before it was ultimately brought down from the outside. What makes Chan Chan especially enigmatic today is the absence of any written system to tell its own story. There are no chronicles, no internal records, only silent adobe walls, dry canals, and scattered traces of ritual left in the sand. Each theory explaining the city's collapse carries its own logic, yet none fully accounts for the entire process. Chan Chan appears to have disintegrated from within, before being conquered from without, leaving a profound void in the historical record of ancient America. Ultimately, Chan Chan stands as an ancient warning about the fragility of systems once thought invincible. A city built of earth, sustained by water, and governed by belief, endured for centuries, but when a single link in that chain broke, the entire structure collapsed. Because there is no single definitive explanation for Chan Chan's decline, the city continues to haunt modern scholars and observers alike. Chan Chan is not merely the ruin of a lost civilization, but an unresolved question about how ancient societies survived, adapted, and ultimately vanished within the unforgiving currents of history. Hidden deep within the jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula lies a Maya city that refuses to explain itself. Koba was not a forgotten village nor a minor ceremonial site. It was once a powerful center that commanded vast territories, built monumental architecture, and linked distant regions through an extraordinary network of stone roads stretching far beyond the horizon. Yet today, Koba stands apart from other great Maya cities for a troubling reason: its story ends without an ending. There is no clear record of conquest, no dramatic destruction, no carved declaration of collapse. Instead, Koba rose quietly, flourished extensively, and then slipped into silence, leaving behind a sprawling city without a clear historical voice. This unsettling absence of answers is what makes Koba one of the most enigmatic and challenging mysteries in the study of the ancient Maya. What do you think truly caused Koba to fade into silence? Environmental change, a collapse of belief, or something history has yet to reveal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The network of Sakbiob radiating from Koba represents one of the most remarkable engineering and organizational achievements in the Maya world. These ancient white stone roads were not merely short ceremonial paths, but long-distance corridors extending across jungles, wetlands, and uneven terrain with an almost unnatural straightness. Constructing and maintaining such routes would have required careful planning, centralized authority, and a sustained labor force over generations. This level of coordination suggests that Koba was not an isolated city, but the administrative heart of a broader regional system. Rising above this network, the Calakmul pyramid reinforced that authority through sheer scale. As the tallest structure on the Yucatan Peninsula, it symbolized visibility, permanence, and control, an architectural statement that Koba was designed to be seen, remembered, and obeyed across a vast landscape. Yet in stark contrast to its scale and influence, Koba's historical record is remarkably sparse and fragmented. The city left behind very few stelae, minimal royal inscriptions, and almost no detailed accounts of warfare, conquest, or dynastic lineages like those found at Tikal, Calakmul, or Palenque. This silence makes Koba appear as a center of power that deliberately avoided leaving traces, or one that operated under a political and social model fundamentally different from other Maya cities, one that modern scholarship has yet to fully decipher. The greatest mystery of Koba lies not in its emergence as a major Maya center, but in the nature of its decline. Unlike many ancient cities, Koba shows no signs of violent destruction or sudden collapse. There is no archaeological evidence of large-scale warfare, no widespread burning, and no systematic dismantling of its temples or civic structures. Equally absent are indicators of catastrophic natural disasters such as massive earthquakes or regional flooding. Instead of ending in ruin, Koba appears to have faded gradually, leaving behind intact architecture and unanswered questions. Instead, Koba appears to have been gradually and deliberately abandoned, as if its central role slowly became unnecessary within a changing regional order. Some areas show evidence of continued use even after the main political authority weakened, suggesting that the collapse was neither sudden nor uniform, but rather a prolonged, fragmented, and difficult-to-trace process. This is precisely what sets Koba apart from many other Maya cities. It did not die, but seems to have quietly withdrawn from the historical stage. Koba's decline becomes far more enigmatic when examined alongside regional developments, particularly the rapid rise of Chichen Itza during the same period. As Chichen Itza expanded its political influence, economic networks, and ritual authority, Koba did not show signs of violent defeat or forced assimilation. archaeological evidence reveals no widespread destruction, no abrupt abandonment linked to famine, and no clear indicators of internal collapse. Instead, the shift appears subtle and uneven, suggesting a gradual redistribution of power rather than conquest. This regional contrast implies that Koba may have been sidelined by changing alliances, trade routes, or ideological systems rather than eliminated through direct conflict. Scholars increasingly suggest that Koba's decline may be rooted not in conflict, but in long-term shifts within the Maya world itself. As political influence and ritual authority migrated toward emerging centers, Koba may have gradually lost its strategic relevance within regional networks of power and exchange. Equally significant is the role of environmental stress. Koba was deeply integrated with surrounding lakes and water systems, which were essential not only for survival but also for religious meaning. Even slow fluctuations in water levels or prolonged periods of instability could have disrupted agriculture ritual calendars and the spiritual legitimacy of local elites. In a society where authority was inseparable from cosmic balance, such changes may have eroded belief, undermining Koba from within rather than destroying it outright. If Koba truly functioned as a ritual center connected to water, rain, and cycles of life, then any disruption to this system could have triggered a crisis of faith, leading to political decline without the need for violence or destruction. It is precisely the absence of clear evidence that makes Koba's disappearance so unsettling. The city left behind no definitive ending, no remembered moment of collapse, no final date carved in stone. Jungle vegetation slowly engulfed the roads. Trees overtook the pyramids, and Koba faded from collective memory, as if a major center of power had never existed there at all. This prolonged silence has turned Koba into one of the greatest unanswered questions in Maya archaeology. How could a city that once connected a vast region, built monumental architecture, and maintained influence for centuries, exit history without leaving a clear explanation behind Koba? Therefore is not merely an ancient ruin, but a reminder of the limits of modern knowledge evidence that some civilizations did not collapse amid war or disaster, but dissolved quietly through subtle shifts in time, leaving behind a void that science continues to struggle to understand. Monte Alban is astonishing not only because of its location, atop an artificially modified mountain, but also because of the suspiciously high level of precision in its urban planning, which nevertheless does not fully conform to the astronomical rules archaeologists typically expect from an ancient ceremonial center. From an overall perspective, Monte Alban clearly does not appear to be a collection of structures built randomly or expanded gradually in response to population growth. The central plaza, pyramids, temples, and ceremonial courts are arranged along clearly defined, calculated axes, revealing a unified planning vision from an early stage. The right angles, long axes, and carefully measured distances between structures demonstrate that the Zapotec possessed advanced spatial measurement skills and a well-developed concept of architectural order. If Monte Alban was planned with such precision, why did its builders choose not to fully align the city with the sky? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. It is precisely in its spatial orientation that Monte Alban begins to challenge long-held archaeological assumptions. Unlike many ancient ceremonial centers across Mesoamerica, where structures are carefully aligned along east-west or north-south axes or directly tied to astronomical events such as sunrise points during solstices and equinoxes, the main axis of Monte Alban clearly deviates from these conventions. What is especially striking is that this deviation does not appear randomly or in isolation. Instead, it is repeated consistently across multiple architectural elements, from the central plaza to the surrounding ceremonial structures. Such uniformity makes it unlikely that the orientation resulted from complex terrain, technical limitations, or imprecise measurement. Rather, it points to a deliberate decision, one that was established during the earliest stages of planning. By consciously refusing to conform to familiar astronomical axes, the Zapotec appear not to have regarded the sky as the ultimate organizing principle of space. Instead, they prioritized a different logic, one in which architectural order, social authority, and ritual meaning outweighed strict alignment with cosmic cycles. The fact that Monte Alban does not fully align with familiar astronomical axes and phenomena has forced scholars to reconsider the assumption that the sky always occupied a central role in the urban planning of ancient civilizations. Monte Alban was clearly not designed as an observatory in the traditional sense, nor did it prioritize the direct marking of solar cycles in the way many later Maya structures did. Instead, the city appears to operate according to its own spatial reference system, one in which architectural order, symmetry, and the relationships between structures played a decisive role. Within this framework, the sky did not disappear from religious thought, but it no longer held absolute dominance. Monte Alban thus reflects a different approach in which space was organized to serve social authority and internal ritual functions rather than being strictly governed by specific cosmic events. Some scholars argue that Monte Alban's layout reflects an abstract cosmological model, one that does not seek to mechanically replicate the sky, but rather to express an idealized order. Within this framework, the city does not need to follow the sun or the stars. Instead, it becomes a center of order in its own right, where human authority is placed on par with or even above natural order. The decision to orient architectural axes away from common astronomical directions may carry symbolic meaning. Monte Alban does not submit to the sky, but redefines space according to the Zapotec worldview. The layout of ceremonial structures at Monte Alban clearly indicates that the city was not designed to direct attention toward the sky, but rather to draw people inward toward its own center of power. Instead of facing recognizable astronomical points, such as sunrise positions or familiar cosmic axes, most temples and ritual structures are oriented toward the central plaza. This space served as the stage for public ceremonies, sacrifices, and collective displays of authority. As a result, the spatial organization is distinctly inward-facing, forcing participants to confront the power of the ruling elite directly. Monte Alban was not built to observe the cosmos, but to lead people into a carefully constructed social order, one in which power was not only exercised, but also seen, felt, and internalized through ritual. The precision of Monte Alban's urban planning, when considered alongside its lack of strict adherence to astronomical axes, suggests that the Zapotec may have employed an independent system of measurement and orientation, one that did not rely on the sky. This system appears to have been grounded in the physical landscape, panoramic visibility, and the symbolic relationships between functional zones within the city. From Monte Alban, the entire Oaxaca Valley lies within view, and the architectural axes seem designed to impose presence and authority over the social space below, rather than to track the movement of celestial bodies above. Urban planning, therefore, was not merely a technical exercise, but a tool of control, transforming the mountaintop city into a dominant vantage point where political and ritual power were reinforced through the very organization of space itself. Notably, this astronomical deviation does not diminish Monte Alban's sophistication. On the contrary, it emphasizes the independence of Zapotec thought. While many ancient centers sought harmony with natural cycles, Monte Alban appears to have intentionally set itself apart, asserting that human social and ritual order could exist alongside or even in opposition to cosmic order. This mountaintop city was not a tool for reading the sky, but a stage upon which legitimized power was performed. Ultimately, it is this very contradiction, extreme precision, combined with a refusal to fully conform to astronomy, that makes Monte Alban one of the most difficult sites in the ancient Americas to explain. It forces us to accept that not all civilizations interpreted the sky in the same way, and that for the Zapotec controlling social space may have been more important than synchronizing with natural cycles. Monte Alban, therefore, is not merely an ancient city, but evidence of a fundamentally different way of thinking about order, power, and humanity's place in the universe. High above the northern Andes of Peru, where thick cloud forests swallow entire mountain ridges, and the landscape itself resists human presence, stands Kuelap. Perched more than 3,000 meters above sea level, this immense stone complex was not simply built, it was imposed onto one of the most hostile environments imaginable. Even today, reaching Kuelap is a challenge. For the people who built it centuries ago, the task would have been almost unthinkable, and yet they did it. This raises a question that has haunted archaeologists for decades. Why would an ancient civilization pour enormous effort into constructing a monumental center in a place so isolated, so inaccessible, and so unforgiving? Kuelap's location alone suggests that its purpose went far beyond convenient survival or ordinary settlement. It points to something far more deliberate and far more mysterious. What do you think? Kuelap was built for a defensive fortress, a ceremonial center, or a purpose we still don't understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Kuelap is encircled by colossal stone walls that rise nearly 20 meters high, their sheer mass and thickness conveying an unmistakable message of strength and defense. At first glance, the site appears to be a classic mountain fortress, engineered to intimidate and withstand attack. Yet this assumption begins to unravel once the interior is examined. Instead of open plazas, parade grounds, or organized military zones, the space within the walls is crowded with hundreds of circular stone structures packed closely together. Their dense arrangement restricts movement and lacks the spatial logic typically associated with defensive strongholds, revealing a striking contradiction between Kuelap's formidable exterior and its constrained interior design. Kuelap's entrances present one of its most perplexing architectural features. The entire complex is accessed through only 3 main gateways, each deliberately designed to narrow as one moves inward, eventually allowing passage for just a single individual at a time. Such an arrangement suggests an extreme level of control over movement, forcing anyone entering to slow down, become exposed, and submit to the spatial logic of the structure. This design is unusual for a military fortress, where wider gates and internal flexibility are essential for deploying defenders. Instead, the narrowing entrances imply a purpose rooted in regulation, ritual, or symbolic authority rather than pure defense, reinforcing the idea that Kuelap's function extended beyond conventional warfare. Inside Kuelap, more than 400 circular stone structures form a dense and puzzling landscape. Their uniform shape suggests deliberate planning, yet their function remains unclear. Most lack evidence of permanent habitation. There are no consistent hearths, domestic tools, or storage features typical of residential buildings. At the same time, their number and close spacing make them impractical as purely ceremonial monuments. Some structures show associations with burials or ritual activity, while others appear unfinished or minimally used. This ambiguity challenges traditional archaeological categories and reinforces the idea that Kuelap was not a conventional city, but a site governed by social, symbolic, or ritual logic we no longer fully understand. Kuelap was built by the Chachapoya people, a civilization that left behind almost no written records and no known chronicles. Our knowledge of them comes primarily from archaeology and fragmented accounts recorded by the Inca after their expansion into the region. This absence of written documentation means that all interpretations of Kuelap remain to some extent speculative. The central mystery of Kuelap lies in the fact that its true purpose still defies clear definition. Every conventional explanation encounters critical contradictions. If Kuelap were intended as a military fortress, its interior lacks the space infrastructure and open zones required to house and sustain a large standing force. If it functioned as a true urban center, the archaeological record reveals an absence of consistent domestic activity, no clear patterns of daily life production or long-term habitation. And if Kuelap served primarily as a religious or ceremonial site, the immense scale of its fortifications appears excessive, far beyond what ritual spaces typically require. This persistent mismatch between form and function is what sets Kuelap apart, suggesting that it operated according to a social or symbolic logic that no longer fits modern archaeological categories. Some scholars argue that Kuelap functioned primarily as a power center for the Chachapoya elite rather than as a settlement for the general population. In this view, the site was reserved for rulers, priests, and ritual specialists, while most inhabitants lived in dispersed communities across the surrounding valleys. The massive stone walls would not have served only a defensive role, but also acted as physical and psychological boundaries, separating the sacred and political core from the outside world. Authority was reinforced through architecture itself. The narrowing entrances likely imposed ritualized movement, compelling visitors to slow down, lower their posture, and experience a controlled transition from the ordinary realm into a space of elevated power, symbolism, and sacred legitimacy. Another compelling interpretation views Kuelap as a site whose function evolved over time rather than remaining fixed. In its earliest phase, Kuelap may have served primarily as a ceremonial or symbolic center anchored in ritual authority rather than daily habitation. As regional instability increased, whether due to conflict, social fragmentation, or external pressure, the site may have taken on a more defensive or political role, becoming a refuge or a visible statement of power. Archaeological traces of burning, scattered human remains and atypical burial contexts suggest that Kuelap's final phase was marked by disruption rather than peaceful decline. These signs point to the possibility of terminal rituals or a sudden collapse after which the site was deliberately abandoned, frozen in time, as Chachapoya society itself unraveled. To this day, Kuelap stands outside all familiar definitions, not entirely a fortress, not quite a city, and impossible to reduce to a single temple complex. This ambiguity makes Kuelap one of the great unresolved questions of Andean archaeology. Its purpose appears to exist at the intersection of power, ritual belief, and social control. Kuelap is not merely a stone structure, but the expression of a lost architectural mindset and worldview, one in which function was not defined in modern terms. It is precisely this lack of clarity that has turned Kuelap into one of the deepest remaining mysteries of the pre-Inca world. Deep within the unbroken jungles of southern Mexico lies the shadow of a city that once ruled the Maya world and then vanished almost without a trace. Calakmul was not a forgotten village or a minor ceremonial site. It was one of the most powerful political capitals the ancient Maya ever built, a megacity of immense scale whose influence stretched across the lowlands for centuries. Yet today its name barely echoes in popular history. Only when archaeologists began cutting through layers of jungle did the true magnitude of Calakmul emerge: more than 6,000 structures, a vast urban network, and the unmistakable fingerprints of empire. From here, the Snake Dynasty orchestrated alliances, rivalries, and wars on a regional scale. But Calakmul's true mystery does not lie in how great it became, it lies in how it disappeared. Not through fire, not through conquest, but through a long, quiet fading that left no final message, no clear ending, and no definitive explanation. How does a megacity like Calakmul vanish without warfire or collapse? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Unlike many other ancient cities, whose endings are marked by destruction, fire, or violent conquest, Calakmul presents a far more unsettling picture. Archaeological evidence reveals no signs of widespread burning, no collapsed defensive walls, and no layers of debris that would indicate a sudden invasion or a major natural disaster. Instead, what researchers observe is a slow process of disintegration. Key structures were no longer maintained, ceremonial plazas gradually fell silent, and the erection of stone stelae, once symbols of royal authority and historical continuity, declined noticeably in both quantity and craftsmanship. The city did not collapse in a single dramatic moment. It quietly withdrew from the flow of history. The absence of a clearly defined terminal event challenges traditional models of collapse and raises a profound question: how could a political and economic superpower like Calakmul, equipped with advanced engineering, broad regional influence, and centralized authority, fade away without a decisive destructive blow? The silence it left behind is both deeply puzzling and haunting. One of the most widely discussed explanations for Calakmul's decline centers on a prolonged environmental crisis, particularly long-term drought. Unlike many other Maya cities, Calakmul was built in a region almost entirely devoid of natural rivers or permanent lakes. Its survival depended on an exceptionally advanced network of artificial reservoirs, canals, and water management systems designed to capture and store seasonal rainfall. For centuries, this engineered landscape sustained a vast population and allowed the city to flourish in an otherwise hostile environment. However, the very sophistication of this system may have concealed a critical vulnerability. When rainfall patterns became unstable, even a small reduction in seasonal water could trigger cascading failures, crop shortages, food insecurity, social tension, and political instability. A series of extended droughts would not merely strain the system, but undermine the foundation upon which Calakmul's power rested. Yet this hypothesis alone remains incomplete. Other Maya centers faced similar climatic stress and still managed partial recovery, while Calakmul did not. This raises a deeper question: did environmental collapse act as the trigger, or was it the final pressure applied to a system already weakened by political and social fractures? Another compelling explanation for Calakmul's decline focuses not on external forces, but on the gradual breakdown of its own political system. As the capital of the Snake dynasty, Calakmul operated as the strategic nerve center of Maya geopolitics, exerting influence through a vast web of alliances, dynastic marriages, proxy wars, and loyal client states. This system required constant negotiation, military success, and symbolic authority to remain stable. When Calakmul began to suffer key defeats, particularly against long-standing rivals such as Tikal, the credibility of the Snake dynasty weakened. Allies may have defected, vassal cities may have resisted control, and the ideological foundation of divine kingship may have fractured. Unlike a sudden overthrow, this type of collapse would unfold quietly, power eroding year by year as loyalty dissolved. Such an internal unraveling could explain why Calakmul shows no signs of violent destruction, yet rapidly lost regional relevance. Still, this hypothesis leaves an unsettling mystery. If Calakmul once dominated the Maya world, why does it nearly vanish from later historical memory? One possibility is deliberate erasure. Victors shape narratives, and it is plausible that Calakmul's rivals systematically minimized or excluded its legacy, transforming a former superpower into a shadow on the margins of history. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Calakmul's disappearance lies in the silence of its own records. The city's stone stelae, once used to glorify rulers' victories and divine authority, gradually become fragmented, vague, and increasingly scarce. Instead of documenting decline, defeat, or crisis, entire periods appear to vanish from the historical narrative as if deliberately removed or never recorded at all. There are no inscriptions mourning a fallen dynasty, no accounts of a final battle, and no ceremonial markers of collapse. Calakmul does not seem to have ended it, simply stopped speaking. This absence suggests more than loss through decay. It implies selective memory, whether through intentional erasure, by rivals' internal censorship, or cultural taboo. The silence itself becomes evidence. a city that once shaped Maya geopolitics, fades not in fire or ruin, but in deliberate forgetting, leaving behind gaps where history should have been. The unexplained disappearance of Calakmul has led many scholars to believe that this is not merely the story of a single city, but a reflection of a deeper crisis affecting the entire ancient Maya civilization. When complex political systems, fragile environments, and social structures rooted in divine authority collided, collapse could occur silently, yet irreversibly. Calakmul in all its grandeur and mystery stands as a symbol of a civilization capable of reaching extraordinary heights, only to vanish without leaving behind a final explanation. Today, Calakmul still lies there, buried beneath the jungle, a stark reminder that history does not always end with thunderous destruction. Sometimes the greatest civilizations disappear quietly, leaving behind not answers, but questions that may never be resolved.